Important update about YouTube playlists. Hey everyone. We've received many messages asking why our YouTube playlists aren't showing up. Do we create YouTube playlists? Yes, we absolutely do. So why can't you see them? Honestly, we're not sure. We've been in contact with YouTube support for several months now, but we still haven't received a clear answer or solution. After much discussion, our team has decided to take matters into our own hands. We believe the issue might be related to the number of playlists we've created on a single channel, possibly too many. Our solution? We're launching 2 additional YouTube channels, giving us a total of 3. This way, we can organize our audiobooks better and avoid the playlist visibility issue in the future. This change only affects our YouTube audience. If you're a patron supporter, you can still access all our audiobooks by visiting the collection menu on Patreon. Thanks so much for your time and continued support. Happy listening, but for now, maybe I should start by crafting some simple ones, like luck charms or purification amulets. Nodding to himself, Ren immediately began testing his next amulet-making attempt. Chapter 243, Lightning Flash Amulet. At noon, lunch was served in a private room with a view of the back mountain. Both sides of the long table were filled with people. However, among all the girls, the only male sitting there became the clear standout in the room. At this moment, Kaguya was seated on Ren's left, while Sanoko was on his right. The 2 young ladies at his sides completely locked him in place. Both of them were daughters from prominent families and knew each other well, so they would not engage in any open or underhanded fighting. It was a situation that was still acceptable. Especially for Kaguya, who was already aware that her best friend and maid had fallen for him. Aside from a bit of jealousy, she was not particularly agitated. If it had been something unexpected, perhaps her emotions would have surged out of control. But when it was something within expectations, there was no need for such an intense reaction. Because both of them understood very well that this situation was not going to end anytime soon. Looking at the dazzling spread of food on the table, Ren's eyes were practically blinded by the brilliance of it all. He couldn't help but sigh. I really think the world of the rich is hard to understand. Sanoko smiled beside him and leaned toward Ren. Feeling like you've been dragged into a strange world again? Yes, I really feel like I've been brought into a completely unfamiliar world. Ren did not deny it at all. To him, the world of the wealthy was entirely unknown territory. It's not that I have any issues with it. I'm just not used to it, especially being the one who's taken care of like this. Ren nodded in agreement, clearly sharing the same feeling. Exactly. I'm not used to being taken care of either. I'm more used to looking after my dad at home, so being treated like this all of a sudden feels a little awkward. It's perfectly normal to feel that way. Nagi didn't think their feelings were strange at all. Although she had been taken care of since childhood, she could still understand their discomfort. Amamiya and Ren are both people who work hard and take care of themselves. We're used to being served, so of course you'd feel uncomfortable when suddenly dragged into this world. But that discomfort isn't necessarily a bad thing. I actually think that people who know how to take care of themselves are better than those who are used to being taken care of. Izumi, who was sitting beside her, smiled and applauded. Nagi-chan, that's probably the most reasonable thing you've ever said. Usually, your quotes are too profound for people to understand. Nagi blushed instantly when her past comments were brought up. Ah. Don't remind me about that all the time. With that, the conversation naturally flowed, and the atmosphere at the table became much livelier than at the start. Everyone began chatting freely. Well, we're here at the hot springs to relax, so let's not dwell on those things too much. Actually, Amamiya, with your current abilities, you could easily become a wealthy businessman if you wanted. Aizawa Sakaya brought up the topic directly. Everyone immediately showed interest in the subject. Yeah, I think Ren could definitely do it. Sanoko spoke first. Remember a month ago, when those Italian robbers stole the maple leaf gold coins? The leader hid them somewhere, but Ren was able to divine their exact location. Back then, I thought that even if he didn't work a regular job, he could just make a fortune every day by using his divination abilities to find hidden treasures. It certainly sounded plausible. Aizawa Sakaya looked a little curious. Amamiya, you can even divine treasure locations like that? Ren responded with a helpless shake of his head. Divination is possible, but when the exact location isn't clear, the results could easily point to anywhere in the world. On top of that, many treasures require excavation or recovery from difficult places. I don't have that kind of time to chase after them. I'm not a bounty hunter. To me, wealth is just something to improve my quality of life. After hearing this, Aizawa Sakaya nodded slightly in understanding. She also believed that there were hidden treasures scattered across the world. But most of them were buried deep in mountains or oceans, and the cost of retrieving them might be just as high as their actual value. So there really was no need to go out of the way to pursue them. Of course, to Aizawa Sakaya, the last part of Ren's explanation was the most important. Ren simply wanted enough wealth to live comfortably. He wasn't chasing after riches for the sake of fortune itself. Once his quality of life improved, he had no interest in accumulating excess wealth. From an ordinary person's perspective, this way of thinking might seem strange. After all, if you have the chance to accumulate more wealth, why not take it? But if you look at it from the perspective of the mystic world, it made perfect sense. It showed that in the world of the supernatural, material wealth from the mundane world was only useful for improving life, and it wasn't worth wasting time obsessing over it. After thinking it over, Aizawa Sakaya nodded once again. Indeed, it's way too easy for you to make money, especially you, Amamiya. If you were willing to do business, even just the amulet you gave me would have countless wealthy businessmen and politicians scrambling to get their hands on it. As she spoke, Aizawa Sakaya took out the round, metallic amulet. If used properly, this thing could absolutely save lives at critical moments. At that moment, all the girls at the table turned their attention toward her, clearly interested. An amulet? Because only Ajami was sitting between them, Sanzanin Nagi was able to clearly see the round metal amulet in Sakaya's hand. What does it do? Is it for warding off evil spirits? It's not for warding off evil spirits. It works more like a flash bomb. Hearing that, Nagi let out an ah and immediately seemed to lose interest. Aizawa Sakaya noticed and quickly added more explanation. When you throw it to the ground, it emits an intense flash of light. The light has a hypnotic effect on anyone exposed to it. It can force people to lose consciousness for up to 43 minutes. While unconscious, they also lose their sense of time. Even after waking up, their body remains paralyzed for a while. Are you sure that's just a flash bomb? After hearing the explanation, Nagi was a little dumbfounded. Was that really something an amulet could do? Wasn't that just a flash bomb? Besides the intense light, did it actually share anything else in common with a normal flash bomb? I'd honestly believe you more if you told me it was some kind of virginity-stealing amulet. From Nagi's perspective, this thing was practically as terrifying as a prop that could pause time. If a girl got caught in its effect, 43 minutes would be more than enough time for something seriously perverted to happen. Chapter 244, Selection. Hey. Let me make this clear. Although the flash amulet could be used in the way Sanzanin described, my original intention in creating it was so that a few people with weaker personal abilities could use it for self-defense. For example, Sanoko, Fujiwara, Hayasaka, and Ms. Sakaya. Ms. Sakaya is just an ordinary person. She really does need to rely on tools to protect herself. Sanoko and Fujiwara also don't have much in the way of personal combat abilities. They need props as well. Then there's Hayasaka. Hayasaka's door fruit is more suited for support. Before her physical ability reaches a certain level, she still needs defensive tools. Besides, in certain situations, Hayasaka's abilities make her especially suited to using these amulets for area control. Ren hurriedly explained himself. Otherwise, he would risk being misunderstood as some perverted charlatan. By the way, this is something I had already discussed with Sanzanin earlier. Some things should wait until you're ready. If you're not fully prepared, you can hold off for now. The girls present all understood the meaning behind these words. None of them responded verbally, but they nodded silently. Alright, let's set this topic aside for now. Ren took the initiative to move on from the somewhat awkward subject. Actually, I already talked with Miss Sakaya about this amulet back when we were in the RV. For example, this amulet is indeed useful, but for ordinary people who have undergone a certain level of training or have some resistance, the control time drops to about 20 minutes. If it's someone with special abilities like us, the effect is even weaker. For Kaguya, Sanzanin, and the others, it would only last about 1 minute. As for Ran, if the amulet's effect is not neutralized, it would last at most 20 seconds. Of course, no matter the duration, any tool that risks harming the user is not a good tool. But that problem can be avoided. As he spoke, Ren waved his hand, and a set of tarot cards appeared. These tarot cards are made from a special high-grade material. Keeping one on you prevents you from being affected by these kinds of ordinary props. So, the tarot cards began to rotate in midair, spinning like a magic trick. Everyone here, please choose a card for yourselves. One of the rotating cards fell into Ren's hand. I choose the Fool. The others turned their attention to the deck, beginning to make their selections. Then I'll choose the Lover. Sanoko was the first to choose, speaking without hesitation. Her quick decision made Kaguya pause for a moment, though she quickly recovered. Emperor. After Kaguya made her choice, Hayasaka followed. Temperance. Ren glanced at the master and servant pair and thought their choices were very fitting. The reversed emperor symbolizes childishness, powerlessness, and being dominated. completely matching Kaguya's past situation. The reversed temperance represents exhaustion, anxiety, and imbalance. A perfect reflection of Hayasaka's previous state of being controlled. Well, I'll take the Empress. Sanzan Inagi also chose the card that best suited her. The reversed Empress signifies a lack of ambition, a passive lifestyle, and family disputes, all fitting well with Nagi's personal circumstances. After Nagi, Maria made her selection. I'll choose the Hanged Man. Ren felt that Maria's card should be interpreted in the upright position. It symbolizes trials, sacrifice, rebirth, continuous learning, and unwavering love. An accurate depiction of Maria's life. She chose to leave Nagi and undergo trials, then was reborn through her travels and studies, giving her love wholeheartedly to the one she cares about. I choose the Hermit. Aizawa Sequoia's choice also fit her perfectly, especially when viewed upright. It represents independent action, listening to advice, enjoying solitude, maintaining vigilance, and respecting elders. All very much in line with her role at home, especially as an older sister who looks after others. Well, I'll choose the Magician. Sajinamiya Izumi also made the most appropriate choice for herself. Similarly, the upright interpretation suited her well. The Magician symbolizes new beginnings and the power to enact change, which reflects her relationship with Sanzan Inagi. It speaks of skillful technique, determination, and the ambition to use natural forces to achieve one's goals. All of which matched her position as a shrine maiden. Then I'll choose Strength. The strongest among them, Ran, chose the most fitting card. In her case, both the upright and reversed meanings were appropriate. The upright meaning represents her current self, while the reversed reflects her state before receiving the diary. After everyone had chosen their cards, the corresponding tarot cards floated down into each person's hands. The only one who hadn't made a choice yet. Everyone turned their gaze to the last person, Fujiwara Chika. Which one should I choose? What do you think, Ren? Chika, unable to decide, instinctively turned to Ren for advice. For you, the Sun is the best choice. The upright meaning suits you perfectly. Positive, full of vitality, energetic, successful work, help from benefactors, happy relationships, healthy communication. Chika's eyes lit up at his words. She immediately smiled and said cheerfully, then I'll choose the Sunday. With that, everyone had made their choices. Ren gathered the remaining, unchosen cards. However, he had no intention of restoring the deck just yet. Instead, he kept the leftover cards available in case other people joined later. Ren continued his explanation. These cards are made from special materials and can bypass certain abilities. I used one of them to break through Ran's nullification field. Because of the difference in nature, it can accomplish things that ordinary means cannot. Just to be clear, I'm not saying I can currently break Ran's magic nullification on my own. That ability really is the nemesis of extraordinary powers. But thanks to these cards, as long as you carry one with you, you won't have to worry about getting caught in the effects of the props you use. It was the simplest and most straightforward solution Ren could come up with. Chapter 245, Hot Spring. On the mountainside. After the morning activities and lunch, everyone finally had time to relax. Once everyone caught their breath, they all had the same goal: soaking in the hot springs. After all, the main purpose of this trip was the hot springs. How could they not relax in the springs after a hearty lunch? Before heading to the hot spring, Ren reviewed the layout and information provided in the room. The largest hot spring here was a mixed path, hidden deep within the bamboo forest behind the mountain. It could only be reached through a specially constructed corridor that connected the residential area to the back mountain. This outdoor hot spring usually required a reservation to use. However, since this trip had been privately booked in advance, they avoided the hassle of needing to reserve it. Still, there was another matter to consider. The reason reservations were needed was precisely because of the mixed bathing system. This hot spring hotel was not designed for shady purposes. Its original intention was to allow guests to enjoy the natural hot spring experience more freely. Thus, the mixed bathing was not intended for awkward encounters. Everyone making use of the hot spring were acquaintances, which made it easier to relax even with the mixed setup. There was no so-called inappropriate atmosphere. Still, there was a practical issue. It was not proper to clean oneself completely naked in front of acquaintances in a mixed bath, even if everyone remained calm about it. Therefore, it was best to do the cleansing beforehand in the rooms, and then head directly into the hot spring. Even though it was a bit troublesome, Ren did not skip this step. After washing up in his room, he put on a bathrobe and carried a pair of swim trunks in his hand. Walking through the residential area, Ren easily found the path leading toward the back mountain. The corridor was constructed from wood, open on both sides but enclosed with glass panels to block the cold wind, giving it a very warm feeling. Looks like everyone is still cleansing themselves in their rooms. Strolling down the corridor while admiring the scenery of the back mountain, Ren also kept an ear out for any sounds around him. There were only his own footsteps echoing in the corridor. It seemed he was the first to arrive. As he continued walking, enjoying the scenery through the glass walls, the air grew increasingly humid. The scent of fresh water vapor filled the air, and the temperature noticeably rose. A faint sulfur smell, reminiscent of rotten eggs, began wafting into Ren's nose. However, the smell had clearly been partially neutralized. Mixed within it were the scents of fresh bamboo and various floral fragrances. It was evident that deliberate measures had been taken. While online sources often said that the natural smell of a hot spring was part of the authentic experience, no one really wanted to torture their noses unnecessarily. As Ren got closer to the hot spring, the smell intensified, but it remained bearable. Part of the reason for the stronger smell was also the enclosed design of the corridor. Because of the surrounding glass meant to block the cold, the air circulation was poor, causing the odor to linger. After walking a while, the wooden corridor came to an end. Ahead was an entrance paved with polished pebbles. Pulling open the sliding door, Ren officially stepped into the hot spring area. There were 2 separate changing spaces near the entrance. The equipment looked very new, suggesting that the separation was recently arranged. At least, there was no chance for anyone to feel embarrassed. Ren walked to the changing area on the left carrying his swim trunks. He selected a storage basket, took off his bathrobe and undergarments, placed them inside, then changed into his swim trunks and stepped into the outdoor hot spring. Warm mist nearly obscured everything from view, but when a cool breeze occasionally swept by, it pushed away some of the thick fog, revealing the scene inside. This was clearly a hot spring built into the mountainside. The ground of the hot spring was paved with small stones, and the entire setting felt like a naturally formed spring. There were no gaudy decorations, no statues to add visual flair. It was as if the design was intentionally signaling that this was a pure and authentic hot spring. After surveying the area briefly, Ren moved toward the part of the hot spring closest to the edge, where large sheets of glass had been installed. Walking further out, the mist faded, and it became clear that this wasn't just a simple boundary of glass. It was a hot spring terrace jutting out from the mountainside. The floor at the very edge was made of reinforced glass, and beyond it was a sheer drop into a deep canyon. Anyone who fell would surely meet a grim end. But precisely because of the danger, the glass had been reinforced and thickened to ensure complete safety. Stepping into the hot spring, Ren slowly made his way toward the edge. Standing atop the frighteningly transparent glass floor, he looked out at the vast view before him. The mountain scenery and the distant hot spring town were fully visible. It really is a beautiful view. Such a sight made Ren genuinely sigh in admiration. This place isn't particularly close to the town down below. The hot spring is located mid-mountain. The only direct connection is across the canyon. Plus, there are so many layers of protection here. It really is impossible for outsiders to enter. Realizing this made Ren even more certain. This hot spring definitely did not appear on any public maps. Without a trusted introduction, it was impossible for anyone to even find their way here. Ren could not help but sigh again. Having money is really quite useful sometimes. PFFT. Ha ha ha. A bright, cheerful laugh came from the entrance to the hot spring. Ren turned around and saw Sanoko standing there, wearing a bold red bikini. She had taken off her headband for the hot spring, letting her bangs fall naturally, giving her a slightly more glamorous air than usual. It was something difficult to pull off unless one had very high facial attractiveness. Otherwise, loose bangs like that would just look awkward. It was rare to see Sanoko in such a way. The swimsuit showed off her figure, which was far better than expected. For a moment, Ren was genuinely stunned. Hee hee. Seeing Ren's reaction, Sanoko felt even more confident that her choice of swimsuit was the right one. She smiled and leaned slightly forward, emphasizing her curves even more. Ren, what do you think of my swimsuit? Ren took a deep breath and gave an honest compliment. Very beautiful. Far beyond what I imagined. Chapter 246, Once again normally, Sanoko did not stand out much in her casual clothes or school uniform, but once she put on a bikini, her natural figure was immediately apparent. She appeared slim overall, but her bust was still very prominent. Ren had never studied girls' body sizes closely, but even he could see that Sanoko had everything she should. With her bangs let down completely, it further highlighted a different, more alluring side of her. She was truly beautiful. Ren was stunned for a moment, staring at the girl in front of him. This girl was one of his girlfriends now. He had really become the so-called harem protagonist from the fan works he used to see in the past. Diary, I really love you to death. In a sense, it fulfilled something he had once half-jokingly wished for. Hee hee. Seeing her boyfriend staring at her so intently, Sanoko felt her heart race a little faster. She smiled and walked over to him. She reached out and gently pushed against Ren's chest. What's wrong? You can't even recognize your girlfriend now? Ren finally snapped out of it, but he did not know where he should look. Mainly, this angle was too dangerous. Even if he did not mean to, his gaze naturally fell on Sanoko's fair and ample skin. I can recognize you just fine, but I really don't know where I should be looking. Following Ren's gaze downward, Sanoko immediately understood where he had been looking. Her cheeks flushed a light red. You can look if you want. After all, she had chosen this swimsuit for him to see. As a girl, she could not say something so bold directly, but her actions clearly showed her intent. After appreciating Sanoko's rare look, Ren suddenly thought of something. He asked somewhat selfishly, Sanoko, do you normally wear something like this when you go to the beach? Hearing this, Sanoko glanced up at her boyfriend's slightly uneasy expression and instantly understood what he was worried about. She pushed the silly boy in front of her with some annoyance. Have you ever seen a proper young lady showing off her body at the beach? Isn't that the same as standing around in underwear and letting strangers stare at you? Even when we go to the beach, we don't wear something this revealing. Usually, we wear one-piece swimsuits. As she spoke, Sanoko pointed at her own collarbone. In those, you can barely even see the collarbone. I see. I thought you would just wear bikinis casually to the beach. Ren finally let out a relieved breath. Sanoko immediately raised her eyebrows. Who was it that was slandering these proper young ladies? Ren, let me ask you something. Where did you get the idea that we wear bikinis to the beach? From stories. I knew it. Sanoko smacked her forehead. She should have guessed it was from fictional stories. Feeling the need to teach Ren some basic common sense, Sanoko continued. Ren, listen carefully. In real life, proper girls don't wear revealing outfits casually in public. We care about dignity. Only in private or safe environments would we wear something like a bikini. Ren nodded silently as he listened to Sanoko's explanation. So that was how it was. Only models walking the runway, like at fashion shows, lingerie shows, or art exhibits, will openly show off their figures because that's part of their profession. And sometimes to catch the eye of rich suitors. The term catch the eye was a gentle way of putting it. In harsher words, it was about finding a wealthy patron. Most girls from prominent families like us receive a very proper education. Sure, you see in TV dramas those rich kids behaving like playboys. They exist, but they're usually the children of nouveau riche families. Those who have just made their fortune. The first generation works hard to earn money. It's up to the second generation to stabilize the family, and it's the third generation that typically receives a full education. Once the family stabilizes, the third generation rarely produces playboys. They become more refined, so naturally, they don't make for interesting TV drama characters anymore. And so, you rarely see the third generation in dramas because there's no conflict to exploit. Similarly, they don't engage in the typical nouveau riche behavior. What you see in stories is, at best, one-sided fantasy. Without a bit of spice, those stories wouldn't sell. From the perspective of profits, it was obvious. Stories needed characters doing provocative things to sell better. Sanoko instinctively judged that the portrayal in stories was completely different from reality. Ren thought about it carefully based on Sanoko's explanation and realized she was absolutely right. Yeah, thinking back, it's true. In a lot of stories, no matter the heroine's or the supporting character's background, they often end up doing fan service. No matter what kind of prestigious background the characters have, it doesn't matter to the author. All that matters is selling the story and grabbing attention. Whether or not the characters showed skin had nothing to do with their dignity or upbringing. It was entirely a business decision. That's right. Seeing that her boyfriend finally understood, Sanoko let out a breath of relief. She had been genuinely worried that he had developed some strange misunderstandings about girls like them. Just imagine this, would I, the designated future heir of my family, ever casually be left alone without a bodyguard nearby? It's nearly impossible. Even if I were in some damsel in distress situation, the bodyguards would have handled it before anyone else could swoop in to play hero. And as for Kaguya, even though she's like a canary raised within a gilded cage, she has still received proper education. She's one of the public faces of the Shinomiya family. While the Shinomiya family might see her as their canary, to the outside world, she is still the eldest daughter of the Shinomiya family. So, she would never have the freedom to choose her own love. Not unless she could completely control the Shinomiya family, like she does now. Otherwise, she would always have to accept the marriage arrangements made by the family. Chapter 247, Straightforward. Hayasaka the canary didn't want to resist. It simply knew it couldn't. And that it didn't have the qualifications to. From a young age, the canary had been taught to sacrifice itself for its caretaker. Combined with its environment and upbringing, It never even considered rejecting its gilded cage. At the very least, the canary understood one thing clearly. Everything it received was not for its own sake, but to benefit the breeder. Perhaps this could be interpreted as a human rights issue. But the canary had enjoyed the privileges. And once you've received such benefits, the time always comes to pay the price. Just like that often quoted line from Lord of Mysteries, all the gifts of fate are secretly marked with a price. Once you receive those gifts, it means you'll eventually have to pay more. So Ren could completely understand what Sanoko meant. All the gifts of fate are secretly marked with a price. Right? Yeah. Sanoko nodded softly. We, the third generation, enjoy a wealthy lifestyle, but we'll also shoulder the future burdens of the family. However, sometimes fate shifts. As she spoke, Sanoko smiled and pointed to herself. Because my fate was changed by you, my sister's fate changed too. Your sister's fate. Was she supposed to be married off? Ren still remembered that Ayako Suzuki was originally set to be married for strategic reasons. He asked with curiosity, so, is your sister still expected to marry out now? Of course not. With the current state of our family, why would we let my sister be married off? Now that I've set foot on the mystic path, if she still marries out, who will take over the family business? Me? In the past, Sanoko might have followed her parents' arrangements and stepped into the family business. But now, things had changed. After transitioning from the mundane world to the mysterious one, she had obtained extraordinary power. Even if she were willing to return and handle family matters, her parents would not allow her to waste time and potential in such ordinary pursuits. No wonder your parents think that way. Ren nodded, now fully understanding Sanoko's parents' perspective. Though Sanoko was the intended heir, her role as a newly awakened made her no longer suitable to face the public as a conventional successor. Still, the family business needed a next-generation leader. As Sanoko's blood-related sister, Ayako naturally took the role. Under such conditions, there was no longer any need to marry her off. Your sister might also be pulled into this world by you eventually. Ren considered the possibility quite high. Especially considering the diary gave out rewards based on the holder's will, the odds of Ayako joining the supernatural path increased significantly. Yeah, I think so too. Sanoko agreed. She felt there was a strong chance she would pull her sister into the mystic side as well. But that's for the future. At the very least, it hasn't happened yet. If I can't make it happen by myself, can't I ask you for help? You mean the boons? That's definitely possible. Ren thought it over. There wasn't any issue with that. Compared to sequence paths, the boon system was far more stable. While it could be retracted instantly if necessary, that also meant the risk was much lower. Unless it was a case like Lumian's, where the giver had a permanent connection, most gifted powers could be taken back at any time. And the concern about the gifted person becoming more aligned with the giver. Well, that was not really a problem. Belief itself also caused the same effect. Which of those fanatics in the Aurora Order didn't exhibit such alignment? So, with both me and my sister on the mystic path, how could my parents still expect her to marry off like before? Wouldn't that be like sewing wedding clothes for someone else? That's why my sister's kind of miserable now. She's being dragged around by our parents to study business management. She hasn't had a proper rest in a long time. Thinking about her sister's recent hard work, Sanoko couldn't help but feel genuinely happy for her. It was far better than becoming a caged canary. Your sister must be happy too, right? She is. It's not that she hates managing the family business. She just never had the opportunity before. Now that she does, of course she's excited. Sanoko smiled as she looked at the boy in front of her. This was her boyfriend. It was because of him that everything had changed. She thought back to the kiss they shared on the cruise that made their relationship official, and her face turned slightly red. Ren, we're dating, right? Yes. We haven't done anything a couple usually does for a week, right? Ren blinked. Then he remembered. It really had been a week. Looking at Sanoko now, he realized he needed to be more proactive. He pulled Sanoko into a hug. This time, his hands didn't tremble, and his body was no longer stiff like the first time. Sanoko. This is my first time dating someone. If I ever seem neglectful, please remind me. I'm really not very good at taking the initiative. Sanoko's face turned red again. Did that mean, from now on, she had to be the one to ask when she wanted something? Then, I'll. Ahem. A sudden cough broke the mood completely. Startled, the two instinctively separated. They turned and saw Kaguya standing there, arms crossed, wearing a red two-piece swimsuit and looking none too pleased. Standing behind her was Hayasaka, dressed in a black bikini with white lace. With an amused expression, she made a scissor hand gesture toward Ren. Hey, Kaguya, your swimsuit looks really nice too. Seeing that his second girlfriend was clearly displeased, Ren quickly complimented her without thinking. Kaguya in a red swimsuit didn't have a particularly voluptuous figure, but her slender frame was still well accentuated. While she wasn't curvy, she was undeniably cute. Hearing the compliment, Kaguya's mood visibly improved. Thank you for the praise, Ren. But as she looked at Sanoko and imagined the comparison between herself and the other girl, Kaguya couldn't help but feel slightly downcast. They didn't look all that different in regular clothes. Why was there such a stark contrast in swimsuits? Amamiya-san, compliments like that are not enough for a jealous Kaguya-san. Hayasaka, standing behind her, chimed in dryly. Please clarify. Are you perhaps dissatisfied with Miss Kaguya's figure? Hayasaka. Chapter 248. The person I like the most is when she heard her maid say the thing she cared most about out loud. Kaguya nearly exploded. What made it worse was how bluntly Hayasaka had phrased it, making it sound like she was overly sensitive about her body. No. Hayasaka, well done. The moment she heard Ren's reply, the boiling pressure in Shinomiya Kaguya's chest deflated instantly. A person's figure is largely determined by genetics, or you could say it's a natural trait. I won't deny that most guys tend to prefer girls with better figures, but appearance isn't everything. There are other important traits too. A person's figure wasn't the only measure of value, and Ren didn't think a girl's body was her defining feature. For example, Kaguya's personality is actually quite good. Outsiders might think she's cold, but Hayasaka knows better. She's cold on the surface, but warm underneath. She despises betrayal, yet doesn't act rigidly based on that. Otherwise, I doubt she would have forgiven Hayasaka. When she was younger, she was isolated because she was too talented. She didn't understand why her peers couldn't do what she could. From my perspective, it was because her talent and upbringing didn't match her age group. She was too mature. That's why she always keeps a layer of ice on her face. To avoid repeating that same pain. She probably didn't even realize that, back then, she could have made those bullies disappear with a single word. Or maybe she did realize it, but chose not to. That's the kind of person she is, deep down. At this point, Ren gave an awkward smile. Of course, I know so much because I have some preconceived impressions. All three girls understood what he meant. They knew what he was referring to. Those who knew the story would get it. Because he had read the story and understood Kaguya from it, he had already formed a strong understanding of her traits and personality. That's why he could describe her so clearly. Ren, if you had to pick, which version of Kaguya's story do you like the most? Since the story had been brought up, Sanoko asked curiously. Who, among the versions of Kaguya in the story, did Ren like the most? Kaguya and Hayasaka also looked toward him, interested in his answer. Favorite? It's definitely Hayasaka. Everyone froze. Both Sanoko and Kaguya stared in disbelief at Hayasaka. And the one most stunned of all was Hayasaka herself. This answer was far beyond what she expected. She had assumed Ren would say Kaguya, without hesitation. Who would have guessed he would name her? Sanoko, snapping out of her daze, quickly grew intrigued. She looked from Kaguya to Hayasaka with amusement. Only now did she notice. Hayasaka, despite being a maid, was actually much cuter and more beautiful than Kaguya. And curvier too. Ren, you really picked Hayasaka as your favorite? I thought you liked that ice cube Kaguya. Yeah, same here. I totally thought you'd pick Kaguya. A sudden voice cut into the conversation. Sanoko stopped mid-sentence and turned toward the hot spring entrance. Chika stood there, wearing a pink bikini. Not just Chika, but several others had also entered from the hot spring entrance. Wow, Chika's figure was still outrageously good. Sanoko, normally very confident in her own figure, felt too self-conscious to stand next to Chika. The difference was just too much. Her figure didn't look like something a high schooler should have. The bikini only made it more obvious. Right after Chika arrived, Ran followed behind in a blue bikini. I also thought Ran would go for Shinomiya-san. Ran's arrival caused another shockwave among the girls. Her figure was even more exaggerated than Fujiwara Chika's, dealing a heavy blow to the others' self-esteem. You could clearly see the defined waistline and her long, toned legs. She was practically the embodiment of a perfect girl. Not a trace of excess fat. Her body was clearly shaped by years of training. She radiated both health and beauty. No bulky muscles, just sleek lines and strength. A body any girl would envy. So does Amamiya like maids? Aizawa Sakaya, in a navy blue two-piece swimsuit, also joined. Despite being 13, she already had a surprisingly mature figure. If it's about maids, then shouldn't Ren like Maria too? Nagi, in a red two-piece swimsuit suited to her petite build, commented as she followed up, steering the conversation toward Maria. Nagi, Don't say things that might be misunderstood. Also, Mr. Ren hasn't answered that yet, has he? Wearing a modest brown bikini, Maria's swimsuit had no fancy designs, but it gave her a mature charm that far surpassed her age. It wasn't just her calm demeanor. Her physical development was also far beyond average. Mature in speech, mature in looks. Maria then smoothly redirected the conversation back to the person in question. Ren. Eh? Suddenly placed back in the spotlight, Ren felt the weight of the girl's collective curiosity. The way their eyes glimmered made him feel the pressure mount. Maria smiled and took Nagi's hand as they stepped into the hot spring. This conversation about Mr. Ren's preferences in the story could go on forever. Shall we all sit and continue? The rest of the girls nodded in agreement and began entering the hot spring one after another, sitting around together. Girls always had a soft spot for gossip. Especially when it came to someone they liked. Especially when it concerned how Ren had viewed them back in the story. Of course, they were also curious to know more about their roles in that world. Chapter 249, Everyone who came on this hot spring trip was now soaking in the hot spring, casually watching Ren seated between Kaguya and Sanoko with gossipy eyes. A cool breeze blew down from the mountainside, dispersing some of the fog lingering over the spring. The sudden chill refreshed everyone, preventing them from feeling stuffy after soaking too long. Amamiya, your favorite character from that story you just talked about is Hayasaka? Is it because she's a maid? Sanzanin Nagi asked bluntly, her face filled with curiosity and gossip. I won't deny that a lot of people like the maid archetype when reading stories, but I don't think that's the only reason for me. Ren acknowledged that the maid setup had its charm, but when he first read the story, it wasn't solely that aspect of Hayasaka that drew him in. In fact, Kaguya's story is more of a slice-of-life comedy. I mean the original part where the idea is that whoever confesses first loses. It had a strong comedic vibe. The plot's your typical young lady romance setup. But because the male and female leads keep playing mental games to get the other to confess first, it turns into a kind of romantic battle comedy. And Hayasaka's the one who carries out Kaguya's ridiculous plans, always stuck playing the role of the exasperated spectator. Her face every day is just screaming, how are these two even dating? But she still works hard to follow Kaguya's instructions. As he spoke, Ren couldn't help but laugh. She's a popular, sociable girl at school, but in front of Kaguya, she's the textbook dear maid. Sometimes she even mocks others, and she bottles up so much pressure from work every day. Her only joy is watching hydraulic press videos online. The cat and mouse between the main couple is fun, but Hayasaka's story is actually pretty deep too. After hearing Ren's description, everyone's eyes turned to Hayasaka, suddenly intrigued by her. Even Kaguya looked at Hayasaka with a strange expression. Hayasaka, what Ren said is pretty much spot on with your situation. But I haven't seen you watching hydraulic press videos lately. Miss Kaguya, did you forget? Oko retired, remember? Without him stressing me out anymore, the daily pressure isn't nearly as bad. Hayasaka calmly reminded Kaguya of Shinomiya Oko. Back then, her biggest source of stress was Kaguya's betrayal and the suffocating pressure from Oko. That combination was what wore her down the most. Plus, you don't even like President Shiragane's personality, so I don't have to go around acting like in the story and constantly execute your plans. The daily stress is way more manageable now. Crushing Oko's pride really was the right move. Kaguya now felt more justified in her past decisions. She had stomped all over her older brother's pride and confidence, leaving him unable to recover. She uprooted every nail he had planted inside the Shinomiya conglomerate, promoted the Hayasaka family in full, and sent all the termites that infested the group to prison. She thoroughly severed his ability to stage a comeback within the Shinomiya group or family. Hayasaka also agreed with this. Oko was rigid to his bones. His methods were brutal, always exploiting weaknesses, stomping directly on people's sore spots so no one could resist him. I think the trauma from what Ms. Kaguya did that day will haunt him for life. Even now, Hayasaka couldn't help laughing whenever she recalled the image of Shinomiya Oko's retreating back. Watching from the side, Nagi felt she could understand why Ren liked Hayasaka so much just from that short explanation. Maid plus aloof plus tsukimi plus stress plus sarcasm plus loyalty. It made sense why someone would like her. As a full-blooded otaku, Nagi also thought Hayasaka was a really fun and charming character. But then, Nagi became curious about something else. Then, who do you like most from my story? Seijinomiya. Huh? Seijinomiya Izumi blinked, stunned, her whole face turning red a second later. She was dressed modestly in the same two-piece swimsuit as Nagi. After all, she was still a child, so it was better to wear something age-appropriate. The soft lavender swimsuit made her look like a delicate violet, her shy smile like a flower just beginning to bloom. Being cute is one thing. But even though she's scared, she still bravely faces danger for her friends. She's often confused, but never hesitates when it matters most. She can do so much for Nagi, and her pure friendship with Nagi is something really touching. Ren didn't hold back in explaining why he liked her. The more Izumi listened, the more flustered she became, especially since Ren's compliments sounded way too flattering. Actually, it's not just Sage and Amiya. When faced with temptation, Sanzan-in chose to give up for the sake of her butler. She may be a bit tsundere, but she's always true to herself. Her words can be sharp, but she's incredibly kind at heart. Miss Aizawa is also very attentive to her siblings. Whenever Sanzan-in's in a bad mood, she notices right away and does whatever she can to cheer her up. She's a really good big sister. It's the same with Ran and Sanoko. They always understand each other without words, and their friendship is incredibly pure. When Ran's in trouble, Sanoko always stands by her side. Ran does the same in return. Fujiwara Chika also values her bond with Kaguya a lot. When she sees injustice, she speaks up. Even though she's always smiling and cheats during games, she still really looks out for her juniors. And then there's Miss Maria. She left on her own to help Sanzan-in grow, completely out of selfless love. She's always been caring and considerate. Honestly, she's just like the Virgin Mary. Seeing all of you like this, I've always liked you very much. Chapter 250. The two ants are also very popular. After Ren finished speaking, the hot spring fell into a long silence. The person in question looked around at the silent group in confusion, blinking innocently with nothing but clear puzzlement in his eyes. What's wrong? Did I say something weird? No, nothing's wrong. Nagi quickly interrupted, stopping Ren from overthinking. She lightly patted her cheeks. Maybe the hot spring was too hot. Her face felt unusually warm. Does he really not realize how much that sounded like a confession? Thinking about his personality, Nagi sighed silently. Sigh. He probably doesn't even realize the kind of feelings those words stir up in people. He likely just meant he liked the characters in the story. Her thoughts now somewhat sorted, Nagi still found her face growing warm. It's such a strange feeling to be suddenly praised like that. Especially when he set up an atmosphere so similar to a confession, any girl would feel like they were just confessed to. She glanced around at the others present. Yeah, pretty much everyone was the same. But this also helped Nagi realize something important. It seems that Maria, Izumi, and Sakuya all have a crush on Ren. Only when a boy they like confesses to them would a girl suddenly get emotional. And only when the body releases a lot of dopamine would such emotions be triggered. Take Izumi, for example. Nagi had never seen Takabana Wataru do anything to cause that kind of reaction in her. Ren, aside from us, are there any other characters in the story who are very popular and well received? Nagi's question prompted Ren to recall quite a few people. There are definitely quite a few. This response instantly calmed down all the girls who had been emotionally affected earlier, and now their gossip-loving instincts were fully reignited. I know there are a lot of popular characters. Among them, there are many from Sanoko and Ran's story. For example, Kudo Yukiko, Kisaki Iri, Sato Muako, Absinthe, Meno Akemi, and Meno Shio. Hearing those names, Sanoko and Ren were stunned. Sanoko couldn't help but ask, Ren, why are Aunt Yukiko and Aunt Iri on that list? Those two are the very definition of aunties in this world. At 37, they definitely qualify. So why are they so popular? How should I put it? I think they're popular because they look young, mature, intelligent, and attractive in the story. It's hard for people not to like them. Though a little embarrassed, Ren still gave a sincere answer. Plus, character portrayals in stories aren't the same as in real life. There's a filter. So the signs of aging on their faces are practically non-existent. In that sense, there's a big difference between fiction and reality. A filter, huh? Animation versus reality does have a thick filter. With that kind of filter, it's easy to see why many people like elegant-looking older women in stories. Filter. Yeah, that makes sense. Sanoko nodded. She agreed with the idea. After all, stories are stories, reality is reality. The two shouldn't be confused. I've seen Aunt Yukiko in person. She takes good care of herself, but you can still tell her skin is a bit loose. Yeah. People do gossip about her, and it's true that her skin has gotten looser. Ran couldn't help but agree. She saw Aunt Yukiko more often than Sanoko and more recently too, so she noticed the traces of time more clearly. And my mom too. Because of her work, she often stays up late reviewing documents and checking case files. That's why her eye bags are heavy, and she has crow's feet at the corners of her eyes. Also, her irregular schedule. When I moved in with her, I realized she had a bit of a belly. Age and work have clearly left marks on her mother. Ran was certain that her mom today was quite different from how she was 10 years ago. While she was still charming, She couldn't be compared to the younger generation anymore. As a middle-aged woman, Kisaki Iri was still a strong and hard-working professional. Naturally, it was harder for her to maintain her figure. Being a lawyer wasn't exactly easy. Working constantly on the front lines, Iri's physical condition understandably declined a little. Just some effects from staying up late and a bit of belly fat due to irregular living habits. Those were already very mild symptoms. Ren thought that was perfectly normal. Many people are born beautiful, but only a few can maintain that beauty over time. Sato Mueko, she's the police officer we met on Tsukekaji Island. Ren's reminder made the girls remember the policewoman who came to protect them. In terms of looks and figure, they recalled she was indeed top tier. Meno Akemi and Meno Shio are sisters. Ren, remember what I told you? Your role in the story was reduced because another character entered the plot. That character was Shio Meno, who took the same drug as Kuto. Her sister has long black hair. And she herself actually looks a lot like Sanuko when Sanuko doesn't wear her headband and styles her hair in soft waves. Huh? Sanuko blinked in surprise, and the other girls turned their attention to her. In their minds, they imagined her with wavy hair and no headband. Then they all nodded slightly. They could picture what Shio Meno looked like now. Shio Meno's personality is also very different from Sanuko's. She's more like Hayasaka during her work mode. She shows little emotion and is a very young scientist. She inherited her parents' talent and developed the drug that shrank Kuto based on their research. Thanks to Ren's explanation, the girls now had a better understanding of Shio Meno. A genius girl. But most of the girls present didn't think much of the genius title. Because they were the same. Chapter 251, Other People Make Things Angry. Meno Shio's parents are really impressive. They could actually create such a bizarre drug. Sans and Inagi couldn't help but sigh. It's honestly strange that scientists like them weren't taken seriously. Nagi, I think it has a lot to do with development funding. Developing a drug like that probably isn't cheap, and Meno Shio's parents clearly didn't have that kind of money, Ren replied. Plus, this kind of research is nearly impossible to monetize. Nagi thought it over for a moment and then nodded in agreement. That's true. Even if the drug is successfully developed, it's not something you can profit from. People dream of drugs that restore youth and extend life, but if such a drug were ever made public, it would cause global chaos. At worst, it could even start a war. Ren smiled and nodded at her reasoning. If a drug like that really existed, it would definitely stir things up. But even if it did, it would only extend lifespan, not grant true immortality. After all, the number of cell divisions in the human body is limited. I don't know the exact mechanism of the drug, but I'm pretty sure it just temporarily rejuvenates the body. At best, it could increase the number of cell divisions. So even if you took the drug and turned from an old man into a child like Kuto, it wouldn't actually reverse your lifespan. At most, you'd get a few extra decades, aging backward from old age to adolescence, improving your quality of life. Yeah, that makes sense, Nagi said, nodding. From a scientific standpoint, she felt that life extension and rejuvenation were far more realistic. Amamiya, even if we wanted to live forever, it wouldn't be that easy, would it? Ren nodded slightly. To truly achieve immortality by your own strength, you'd need to at least reach the level of a demigod. From our perspective, as we grow stronger, we gradually drift away from being ordinary humans. We're steadily advancing in power, and fundamentally changing who we are. That's the beginning of becoming immortal. But stepping into the realm of demigods isn't easy. Even if you had the chance to attain immortality, it's still extremely difficult. That's why I think Meno Shio's parents were a bit too idealistic. At best, their drug can extend life and rejuvenate the body. Immortality? That's just wishful thinking. Ren had never denied the potential of technology. However, he also believed that human immortality could not be solved with a couple of pills. At the very least, unless humanity can solve the issue of limited cell division, the lifespan barrier cannot be broken. Although Ren explained it from his own perspective, Meno Shio's parents probably believed the drug could still be improved to create a perfect version. One that could overcome cellular limits. He took out the maple leaf coin from Sefirah Castle and flicked it with his thumb. The coin spun in the air before landing in his palm, face side up. Looks like my guess was right. Even if APTX 4869 is perfected, it can only prolong life at best. He flipped the coin again, and once again, it landed face side up. This is the limit. Ren lightly shook his head and put the maple leaf coin back into Sefirah Castle. Technology's ceiling is life extension. It can't completely stop the natural cycle of cell division. Only by introducing new variables to science can we go beyond mere longevity and approach eternal life. The girls present understood that the variable he spoke of was the mystical. But that kind of mysterious variable would never be added to normal scientific methods. At least, not unless there was cooperation. Without it, such variables would never be integrated. Immortality is definitely a complicated topic, but it's one that every heir obsesses over, Nagi said, shaking her head. She wasn't too disappointed. After all, if just 2 pills could solve humanity's greatest problem, it would be too easy. Let's drop the topic for now. We're still just teenagers. We don't need to be worrying about immortality. That made all the girls laugh. True enough, the average age among them was under 20. Why worry about such a distant issue? We were just talking about the popular characters in Ran and Sanoko's stories. So, are there any popular characters in my story and Shinamiya's story? Nagi changed the subject again, but this one gave Ren a slight headache. The popular characters in Kaguya's story mostly revolve around her. There aren't many surprises. I think the most popular one is probably Hayasaka. As for your story, I think you already know who the top character is, right, Nagi? Hearing Ren say that, Nagi immediately understood who he meant. Katsura Hinajaku, right? Ren nodded. The student council president won both popularity polls. And both times, her votes were more than double the second place. You could call it a landslide victory. Apart from Hinajaku, the only one who might surpass her is Athena from Tendu Academy. She's just as talented and knowledgeable, with athletic skills superior to Hinajaku's. She even outclassed Sage Namiya in some aspects and was the first person to make her taste defeat. Though the others are popular too, none come close to those two in terms of strength and appeal. Suddenly thinking about the topic of popularity, Ren glanced at Maria, who was sitting next to Nagi. Also, Ms. Maria ranked second in both previous popularity polls, consistently ahead of Sanzanin. Chapter 252, Outrageous. The afternoon hot spring ended with casual conversation. Bathing felt incredibly comfortable, especially in that special environment, surrounded by people to talk with. After the bath, everyone returned to their rooms to rest for a bit. The weather outside was cold. It's best not to expose yourself to the cold right after bathing, as it's easy to catch a cold. After a short rest in their rooms, everyone gathered again in the entertainment area. More specifically, they gathered in the massage section of the entertainment area. Aside from massage appointments, there were also several high-end massageurs. They had just enjoyed the hot spring, so it was a reasonable next gathering spot. Ren exited his room and walked down a long corridor. The dim lighting gave the hallway a strangely nostalgic, retro feel. As he made his way through, the sounds around him grew louder. The sound of a game in particular stood out clearly to Ren's ears. There were only 4 people in the group who were really into games. Ren didn't even need to guess and simply followed the sound. Ha! If this were Street Fighter, you wouldn't be able to rely on observation to read my moves. Sanzan Nagi laughed triumphantly. Ugh! 583. Chika lowered her head and clenched her fists in frustration. Without even looking at the screen, it was obvious she had lost badly. A quick glance from Ren was enough to understand what was happening. The spectator's enhanced observation allows Chika to read someone's true intentions through their expressions and movements. But in a game, your attention is focused on the screen. You can't analyze your opponent's body language in real time, so it's naturally hard to predict their next move. Ren walked over with a smile. Let's go another round. Woo-woo? Amamiya, I lost so badly. Chika turned around and hugged Ren, starting to sob. In the gaming field she was supposed to be good at, she had been utterly crushed by Nagi. There. Ren gently patted Chika, soothing her crushed ego. I've told you this before. A spectator is just that, an observer. You're not an actual participant in the game. It's because you haven't fully understood either the game or yourself that you lost so badly to Sanzanin. Chika looked up at Ren with teary eyes. What should I do? Ren instinctively stroked her head, calming her down, then offered his advice, play your role properly. The spectator's physical strengthening lets you determine someone's true thoughts by observing their actions and speech. Mental strengthening enhances focus and observation, which improves your ability to read your target. Every game is built on patterns. The character's moves follow a logic set by the developers. What a spectator should do is observe those characters' actions and then infer the real intention behind them. Attacks, positioning, movement. Chika's eyes lit up instantly. So I should observe the game character's movements to predict Nagi's next actions? Ren smiled and nodded slightly. Exactly. Don't focus on Sanzanin. Focus on the game. Oh. Nagi, let's go again. Just like that, Chika went from teary-eyed to pumped up in an instant, filled with fighting spirit and eager anticipation. Ha, you think you can beat me just because Ren gave you a few tips? Faced with the renewed challenge, Sanzanin Nagi didn't back down. She didn't believe Fujiwara Chika could adjust that quickly. And at first, she was right. The game began, and Nagi still held an overwhelming advantage. With her skillful control, she slowly whittled away the health of the character controlled by Chika. However, this time was noticeably different from the complete beatdown earlier. Chika's character no longer got wiped out without resistance. Instead, she managed to deal over half damage to Nagi's character. No way. Nagi could feel the pressure. Chika's mechanics hadn't improved, but she accurately predicted several of Nagi's big moves, dodged what should have been guaranteed hits, and even landed counterattacks with only half-decent execution. The second match started soon after. This time, Chika's counterattacks were more frequent. More than double the first round. Her execution still wasn't polished, and she couldn't chain stylish combos, but even those simple counters were starting to frustrate Nagi. She still lost the second match. But this time, Nagi's character only had a sliver of health left. If the skill gap wasn't so large, the outcome could have been completely reversed. Oh. Even though she lost again, Chika jumped up in excitement. That was actually kind of crazy. Though she won, Nagi felt the pressure big time. She had barely scraped out the win. If her technical edge wasn't so strong, she might have lost embarrassingly. Her skill hasn't improved at all, yet she pulled that off just by observing. The counterattacks were simple, but the fact that Nagi was almost defeated using just observation made one thing clear. If Chika's technical skills were on par, she would have lost both rounds. It's honestly terrifying how high her observation ability is. Aizawa Sakuya, also a gamer and someone who had studied game mechanics, understood better than most just how absurd Fujiwara Chika's performance was. It's not just observation. Her concentration is insane. In the second round, she interrupted almost every one of Nagi's attacks, cutting them off cleanly and even retaliating. Seijinomiya Izumi wasn't good at action-heavy games, but after being dragged into enough matches by Nagi, she'd developed some appreciation for them. Even if she lacked the hands-on skill, she understood what she was seeing. In conclusion, the spectator's observation ability was absolutely outrageous. Chapter 253, The Battle of Virtue. The third round became a complete reversal of the previous match. With more than half her health remaining, Fujiwara Chika nearly crushed Sanzan in Nagi outright. Yeah. I won. Having defeated Nagi for the first time, Chika was visibly ecstatic. On the other hand, Nagi took the blow hard. How could this happen? How could this happen? Being crushed in her area of expertise by someone with such poor technical skill was the ultimate disgrace for a gamer. Her skills couldn't even last a single round against Chika's overwhelming observation. Didn't this imply that technique alone was inferior to observation? Clack. A hand suddenly rested on Nagi's shoulder, snapping her out of her dazed state. Turning around, she saw Aizawa Sakuya looking at her with sympathy. Nagi, give it up. Your observation and focus can't compare to Fujiwara's. Her observation of the game characters is razor sharp. Didn't you notice? She could read your next move every time. That's not cheating. That's just pure observation and focus. This technique was often referred to as mezzo. But mezzo required extremely high talent, observation, concentration, and even superhuman reaction time. Coincidentally, while the spectator pathway didn't involve physical enhancement, its supercharged observation and focus allowed Fujiwara Chika to prepare in advance without needing rapid reflexes, thus bypassing the body's reaction time. That was how she nearly wiped the floor with Sanzan in Nagi. The spectator isn't suited for direct combat, but in games that rely on observation and awareness, they can really shine. Ren wasn't surprised by the outcome. Given Fujiwara's spectator abilities, this result was to be expected. Ugh. At this point, Nagi was on the verge of tears. She couldn't handle suffering a complete reversal in her specialty. Her beautiful eyes started to brim with tears. Nagi, remember this feeling of defeat. For those who walk the extraordinary path, it's not something to be ashamed of. It's a step that must be taken. You've felt this before with Kaguya, but this time it's in a field you're more confident in, so the frustration hits harder. Ren didn't rub it in. Instead, he gave her a reminder, although he was inwardly exasperated at how rigid she was about martial virtue. He placed a hand on her head. So tell me, when you realized Fujiwara was using an extraordinary ability, why didn't you think of using yours to find a counter? Use that clever mind of yours. Are there any rules in the game saying only Fujiwara can use powers? Why are you being so stubborn? The teary-eyed Sanzan paused. Her expression shifted from hurt to surprise as she looked up. Isn't that cheating? Seriously. Sometimes you need to learn to adapt. It's fine to insist on fair play when it's just between you and Sakuya, but you can't apply that same thinking to everyone. After messing up Sanzan soft, golden hair, Ren sighed inwardly. You know what? I'll set a new rule for you and Fujiwara's match using extraordinary abilities. Fujiwara, if you can detect when Sanzan cheats, You get a point. Conversely, if Sanzan-in manages to cheat and you don't catch her, she gets a point. Then you'll have one normal Street Fighter match per round. The winner gets 1 point. 5 points in total. Whoever loses has to go to the other team and admit she's not as good. That last condition made both Fujiwara Chika and Sanzan-in Nagi's eyes sharpen instantly. Competitiveness wasn't exclusive to boys. Girls could be just as fired up. The punishment wasn't anything severe, but being forced to admit defeat was still emotionally tough. Of course, even knowing it wouldn't affect their relationship, neither of them wanted to lose in something they prided themselves on. So, as soon as Ren suggested the rule, both girls' competitive spirits flared up. No matter what, they couldn't lose. Alright. Chika, think you can handle it? Bring it on. I already beat you once. I'm not afraid of your tricks. The tension exploded instantly. Even Nagi, who had just experienced the sting of defeat, was reignited with the desire to completely overwhelm her rival. Soon, the two started a new round. Meanwhile, Ren nodded to Sage Namiya and Aizawa, then made his way to the massage area. Aside from a few playful kids, everyone else was relaxing there. Ran Mori, Sanoko, Hayasaka, and Maria. These 4 girls had fairly balanced body types and were also prone to shoulder and back soreness. Sanoko and Hayasaka had only mild symptoms, while Ran and Maria had more serious ones. At the hot spring hotel, there was no need to wear thick coats. In fact, the building was so well heated that wearing even a thick yukata could feel stuffy. So everyone only wore a single yukata. Under the yukata was just underwear. With so few layers, the yukata naturally accentuated their figures. When Ren walked in, he saw the girls reclining on massage chairs, their faces relaxed. That kind of deep relaxation clearly relieved a lot of built-up stress. He also noticed that Shinomiya Kaguya was the only one standing off to the side with a gloomy look. He walked straight toward her. Kaguya, have you rested? Yeah. Kaguya's response lacked energy. She seemed down. Still jealous? Huh? Kaguya replied reflexively, then paused. A moment later, she remembered what had happened at the open-air hot spring, and her cheeks puffed up in frustration. Still jealous. Super jealous. And I'm not letting you off the hook. That reaction was so cute that Ren couldn't help but smile. Chapter 254, Ren, want to talk to Ren. Kaguya's puffed-up cheeks from jealousy and frustration made her look even more adorable. Ren smiled and raised a hand to gently poke her cheek. Not easy to coax? Then how about I don't bother? I'm not exactly good at coaxing girls. That line instantly made Kaguya anxious. Try it. Try it first. Maybe I am easy to coax. PFFT. The nearby girls couldn't hold back their laughter. That reaction completely shattered her usual calm image. They didn't even last a minute. Then I'll give it a try. MMM. Ren suppressed his smile and hugged the fidgeting Kaguya before she could start bouncing in agitation. As soon as she realized he wasn't brushing her off, Kaguya's mood improved dramatically. But the moment she felt herself being pulled into a hug, her brain short-circuited. Her mind blanked out. By the time she snapped back to reality, she was already in Ren's embrace. Kaguya. His sudden voice whispered into her ear made it tickle slightly. I told Sanoko in the hot spring just now. I don't really understand girls. I don't know how to interact properly. If I ever neglect you, just tell me, alright? Ren's honest words calmed Kaguya down little by little. As a girl, she knew she needed to be reserved. But just like Ren, this was her first time experiencing romantic feelings and dealing with the opposite sex. She didn't really know how to navigate it either. Maybe being upfront with Ren about her feelings would be better. It was the first time for both of them, so naturally they would need time to learn and grow together. Yeah. That scene from the open-air hot spring flashed in her mind again. Back then, Sanoko had tilted her head slightly and looked up at Ren with a mix of anticipation and shyness, as if silently asking for something. Kaguya now understood exactly what Sanoko was feeling at that moment. She lifted her head, almost like she was possessed. Ren, Hey. Big Ice Princess, be careful. We're still here. In an instant, Kaguya sprang away from Ren as if shocked by electricity. She had completely forgotten there were others watching. Kaguya-san, next time you want to confess something to Ren, find a quiet room. That way, no one will interrupt. If you need privacy, just ask me. The other dimension is very quiet. Hayasaka? Kaguya nearly ground her teeth in frustration. She had almost said something completely embarrassing in front of everyone, only to be interrupted. By her own maid, no less. Ahem. Ren coughed awkwardly and took Kaguya's hand. Next time, if you need to talk, let's do it in private. Kaguya looked down at their joined hands. She didn't pull away, only tightened her grip slightly. Okay. She had already made up her mind. Next time, when no one was around, she would monopolize Ren all for herself. Ren, have you gotten in touch with Uncle Mori yet? Ren suddenly changed the subject. The shift was so abrupt that Ren, who had been watching everything unfold, needed a second to process it. My dad. Not yet. But Aunt Yumi told me that the hot spring inn they went to is Benkai Ryokan. Benkai. Ren muttered the name and instinctively looked toward Hayasaka. Feeling his gaze, Hayasaka smiled and responded. Benkai Ryokan is located just at the foot of Mount Kuro. It's a very old hot spring inn. Since it's an older place, it mostly gets middle-aged and senior guests. It doesn't receive many customers annually. Not many. How do they stay afloat? Ren was curious. Maybe I wasn't clear. I meant it gets fewer guests than newer inns. But they still get a steady stream every week. The annual profits are still decent. But compared to the newer, more modern inns in the area, it definitely falls short. Still, because of its age, the rates are lower. That's why it's actually more popular among older guests. The phrase cost-effective popped into Ren's mind the moment Hayasaka finished. Unlike well-off foreign tourists, most older locals preferred inns that didn't charge exorbitantly. Ren could understand that clearly. This current inn, Jiraku, was high-end in both design and amenities. But that also meant its prices were sky-high. For most families, staying here would be hard to justify. Choosing a more budget-friendly place made more sense for the average person. If it's at the base of the mountain, then Ran, I'll go with you later. Okay. Thinking of what Aunt Yumi had told her earlier, Ran couldn't help blushing slightly, but still nodded. Kaguya, Sanoko, are you two coming? Forget it. There's still time to rest in the afternoon. And I'm not familiar with Uncle Mori anyway. Sanoko waved her hand dismissively and then glanced sideways at Kaguya. Kaguya also glanced in Ran's direction, then slowly let go of Ren's hand. I won't go either. I'd like to rest a bit more. I've been exercising a lot lately. With that, Kaguya sat down next to Sanoko on a massage chair. The intentions of these two girls were obvious. Maybe too obvious. How could Ren not notice? They were giving him space and time with Ran. Looks like I really should talk to Ran. Kaguya and Sanoko's actions clearly confirmed what he had already suspected. Ran had feelings for him too. And now that he thought about it, this whole hot spring trip had been suggested by Ran after she learned about his group's plans. Would a casual friend really do that? Alright then. Ran, let's head out. Okay. Chapter 255, I can't be sure. At the foot of the mountain, in the old hot spring inn called Benkai, 6 middle-aged people were having a reunion for the first time in 5 years. 5 years have really passed in the blink of an eye. Mori Kogoro couldn't help but sigh. Yeah. So much has happened, and yet it feels like no time has passed. That last class reunion still feels like it was yesterday. Ayashiro Yukio echoed with a nostalgic tone. 5 years was not short. To gather again here, at the same place, brought with it a strong wave of emotion. It felt almost surreal. After a moment of silence, Ayashiro looked down at the little boy with glasses sitting beside Mori Kogoro. Actually, I was just wondering. Kogoro, when did you have a son? 5 years ago, you brought Ran along. This time, instead of her, you've brought your little boy. Looks like you and Eri finally made up, huh? Faced with a teasing, Mori Kogoro rolled his eyes. This brat's not my son. He's the child of a friend. The parents went abroad to enjoy life and left their son in my care. Ayashiro Yukio widened his eyes at the boy, then turned back to Kogoro. Your friends got guts, leaving their kid with a sloppy guy like you. But I guess it's fine since Ran's around. If you mess up, she can pick up the slack, right? Exactly. Mori Kogoro downed a drink, then slumped with a sigh. If Ran could take care of him, I'd be thrilled. But our apartment's not big. It used to be fine with just me and Ran. Now that this kid's staying with us, it's a squeeze. Ran's already 16, you know. It's not appropriate for her to sleep in the same room as a child. So ever since he moved in, Ran's been staying over at Eri's place. As Mori Kogoro sighed, his 5 old classmates looked at him sympathetically. Among them, the only 2 female classmates. Ayashiro Yukio's wife, Ayashiro Noriko, and Horikoshi Yumi. Were especially curious. Kogoro, it's been 5 years. Ran must have grown into a real beauty, huh? You got any photos? What kind of father carries photos of his daughter around? Kogoro scoffed. He wasn't in the habit of carrying photos of Ran with him. I have one. Yumi Horikoshi smiled and pulled out a photo she had clearly prepared in advance. I ran into Ran on Monday afternoon at the shopping street. 5 years have passed, and she's grown from a little girl into a young lady. Ayashiro Noriko's eyes sparkled as she took the photo. Wow. This is Ran now. I can't believe how much she's changed in just 5 years. Yukio, Amora June, and Nakamaki Kazushi all leaned in. Just one glance and their jaws dropped. Geez. She grew up into that in just 5 years? She doesn't look like Kogro's kid at all. No kidding. Hearing the jabs from his old pals, veins bulged on Mori Kogro's forehead. Hey. What's that supposed to mean? Can't my daughter be beautiful? She takes after Eri, okay? At that moment, Nakamaki Kazushi suddenly burst out laughing. So you admit it? You couldn't possibly father such a beauty? Damn it. You bastard. Kogro was speechless for a second, then exploded. No matter how much Ran takes after Eri, she's still my daughter. Humphrey. She's beautiful, and you're just jealous. The 3 classmates without daughters twitched visibly. They all felt the same urge to throttle this show-off dad. Fighting him was pointless. They might not even win. So the 3 exchanged glances. That old classmate's silent understanding kicked in immediately. Ayashiro Yukio's mouth curled into a sly grin, and his voice suddenly turned teasing, full of mischievous glee. Kogro, you must be on cloud 9. So tell me, how will you feel the day Ran brings home a boyfriend? That one line made all of Kogro's smugness vanish in an instant. That brat who tried to date his daughter recently had gotten into an accident, but with the way Ran was growing up, suitors would be lining up soon. And he was terrified that day might come too soon. And it wasn't just Mori Kogro who feared that day. Edogawa Konan feared it even more. He had chosen to pursue the black organization no matter the cost. For that goal, he had abandoned his identity as Kudo Shinichi and killed off the idea of ever being himself again. But by doing that, he had cut off his own path of return. Unless the black organization was completely taken down, he would never reclaim his real identity. And so, Edogawa Konan hoped harder than anyone else that the day Ran found a boyfriend would never come. He prayed that she wouldn't fall in love with someone else before he could finish what he started. Right now, he was just a child. He didn't even live under the same roof as Ran anymore. It was impossible to know what might happen in the future. On a hillside not far from Benkairyokan, Ren stood beside Ran, his voice gentle but probing. Ran, do you like me? I can't be sure. If she didn't, Ran would have denied it on the spot, maybe softened it with polite words. But because she couldn't deny it, her voice hesitated. I think I liked Shinichi. That feeling came from us growing up together. But now I don't know anymore. In the past, Ran had been certain she liked Shinichi. Even during their interrupted date at Dorabaiga Paradise. But too much had happened that day. She learned Shinichi had been attacked with a blunt object after tailing 2 suspicious men. That he'd been fed a mysterious drug that shrank him into a child. And that instead of trusting her, Shinichi chose to hide everything. She found out he had even tried to get close to her again under a false identity. If none of that had happened, she might have still said she liked Shinichi. But everything that happened eroded her feelings for him. Especially the part where he moved into her house through deception, secretly acting possessive of her while keeping everything hidden. And ultimately, Shinichi chose to kill himself. Maybe that was the moment Ran finally let go of her feelings for him. How could she love someone who had already decided to disappear? Chapter 256, Mori and his wife never truly broke. Maybe it's not that I'm unsure. Maybe I already became certain the moment I heard the news of Shinichi's death. What's uncertain is just my emotions. As she said this, Ran slowly lowered her head, her gaze falling on Edogawa Konan beside her. So much had happened in the span of a single month. More than she'd experienced in the past 10 years combined. She had been exposed to too many things, which had left her confused and unsure how to sort through her emotions. Then, turning to glance at Ren beside her, Ran quietly leaned in. That uncertainty. It used to be real. But now I'm sure. Maybe the bond between me and Shinichi was completely severed the moment he chose to let Kudo Shinichi die. At just the right moment, Ran reached out and wrapped Ran into a gentle hug. Ran's cheeks turned a soft pink. Her heart was racing. And at that moment, she realized. When she was with Ren, she couldn't keep her emotions in check. Before, she had dismissed this as simple attraction or fleeting emotion. But now, she could say with certainty that she had fallen in love. Not with her childhood sweetheart, Kudo Shinichi, who had already died. But with the boy named Amamiya Ren, whom she'd only known for a month. Now, when I'm with you, I feel like I don't have to endure topics I don't care about. When I'm with you, my heart races, and sometimes I catch myself thinking about you without realizing it. Ran couldn't help but recall everything that had happened over the past month. The initial shock of learning that Shinichi had shrunk into a child had been washed away by the discovery of the diary. By the sheer emotional chaos it had unleashed. When it was confirmed that Shinichi had effectively erased himself from existence, Ren had quietly entered her world. At first, It was just fleeting encounters at school. Then, gradually, their interactions deepened after class. And eventually, the space left behind by Shinichi had been filled. A quiet, slightly self-conscious boy had always kept a respectable distance from her. But somehow, little by little, he became part of her everyday life, adding color to her once monochrome days. Habit was a frightening thing. When Ren realized that she had grown used to Ren being around, she also realized something else: her feelings for him were growing. Maybe she couldn't say with 100% certainty that she liked him. But she definitely wanted to share everything with him. She wanted to let him see the emotional parts of her that no one else could. I ran into Aunt Yumi on my way home Monday night. When I heard about the weekend hot spring trip, you were the first person I thought of. Ran sighed softly. I think it was because of something Aunt Yumi said. She said, you can go on a hot spring trip with your boyfriend and surprise your dad. And the first person I thought of was you. That's an incredible honor. Ren hadn't expected that at all. Is this because of the story again? Ran asked, raising an eyebrow. Ren nodded with a somewhat pained expression. It is. In the story, your feelings for Kudo Shinichi were so unwavering. Even when complications arose, you never faltered. So I assumed that you were still just as loyal in real life. Hearing this, Ran angrily pinched the big idiot beside her. I can be loyal. But he didn't give me the chance. Loyalty starts with communication, right? He destroyed his own identity. We weren't even in a relationship. So why should I wait around and avoid getting close to other guys just for him? That's not loyalty. That's just blind devotion. If they had been a couple, maybe it would have been different. But they weren't. Loyalty should only exist in a confirmed relationship. I was just a fool in that story. Who would be that loyal to someone they weren't even dating? And do you think I wasn't hurt by how I was treated in that story? No matter how patient someone is, if they're constantly hurt, they'll eventually give up. Ran had never believed that feelings could last forever on their own. No matter how deep the bond, it had to be nurtured. She had seen her own parents, despite their once strong relationship, live apart because of unresolved issues. She and Shinichi were just childhood friends. Nothing more. Hiss. Ren flinched from the sharp pain where she had pinched him. Even the clown couldn't hide the agony from his face. Ran, please go easy on me. My body's not that durable. Ran paused and stopped pinching. She glanced at the spot on his waist she had just grabbed. She thought about massaging the bruise to help ease the blood flow, but gave up. They were outside. She couldn't just slip her hand under Ren's clothes, could she? She couldn't exactly do it over the fabric either. So instead, she lightly knocked on his arm a couple of times. Anyway, the characters in the story are way too perfect. But no one's that flawless in real life. No one can sustain a one-sided love forever. Especially in relationships. If the feelings aren't returned, they'll burn out. Even if my parents had a strong bond, they still live apart because of their differences. If I didn't know that they still care about each other and secretly meet from time to time, I might have thought their relationship was over. Huh? That was the first time Ren had heard this particular detail, and he was genuinely surprised. Your parents still meet up often? Ren pouted slightly and replied in exasperation. Of course. Why else do you think they've been separated for so long without divorcing? You think it's just because of me? Those two just had an argument. It's not like they really fell out. I've been watching the whole time. How could I not know? Both of them are stubborn. If either one would just take the first step, they'd be back to normal. I even tried arranging situations to bring them together without them realizing. I gave them every chance. But they always put on an act in front of me. Click. Ran clicked her tongue in irritation. Sometimes, being the one who knew the truth was the most exhausting thing. Especially when you had to pretend not to know. Chapter 257, Death God Arrives. Oh my god. This is a huge scoop. Even Ren was surprised by this bombshell. This part wasn't mentioned in the main story. The relationship between Kogoro and Irei is seriously complicated. Normally, a couple separated for more than 10 years would have divorced by now. But these two have been apart for over a decade and still keep in regular contact. That alone is pretty remarkable. Claiming it's for Ran's sake just feels awkward now. Especially considering Ran is already 16. Kids that age can handle their parents' divorce. They're not clueless anymore. But who would have thought Ran would end up involved in such a juicy mess? The couple keeps in contact and even meets up often. So, is Ran part of some ongoing act between them? They sure like to play games. And the result? Honestly, it's jaw-dropping. I'm saying this because I'm not an idiot. Ran always felt like she was being treated like a fool. As for love, I don't know. But if you let go of my hand, I'm leaving. Ren understood what she meant, so he didn't plan on letting go. Now that things had reached this point, he might as well be honest and just face it. Take initiative, accept responsibility. I won't let go. Feeling the hand on her waist tighten, Ran felt both happy and a little shy. Yeah. But you should be more careful around others. I already told them you were dating Sanoko. If Dad found out about us, he'd be furious. So we have to keep it a secret for now? Exactly. Given her family situation, Ran still thought it was best to keep things under wraps. Dating can't be too obvious. Not just at home, but even at school it could cause issues. The two walked down to the base of the mountain together. Of course, by the time they reached the bottom, Ran had already put a bit of distance between her and Ren. The Benkaiotsun hotel was clearly different from the one they had booked. Swish. The sound of the sliding door opening caught the attention of the front desk staff. Seeing two young people enter in thick yukatas, the staff immediately recognized them as guests from a nearby hot spring hotel. Hello, may I help you? Yes. My name is Mori Ran. My father, Mori Kogro, is attending a class reunion at this hot spring hotel. I am here to see him. The staff didn't even need to check the list. There were only 6 guests booked that weekend, and one of them was Mori Kogro. Please come in. Your father is in the main hall. Thank you. Ran thanked her, changed into indoor slippers with Ren, and walked toward the main hall. Sure enough, once they stepped inside, Ran saw her father and his group gathered together, seemingly focused on something. Ran quietly approached and tapped her father, who had an unusually gloomy look on his face. Kogro was startled. When he turned around and saw his precious daughter behind him, he was both surprised and shocked. And the boy with glasses next to her? That was a blow to his heart. You scared me, Dad. Seeing his daughter's cheerful expression, Mori Kogro felt like he was on the verge of a heart attack. She really scared him this time. Ran, what are you doing here? I ran into Aunt Yumi earlier and found out you were having a class reunion at this hot spring hotel. So I made a suggestion, and it was accepted. That's why our occult research club chose this place for our weekend trip. Good grief, what a random reason. Almost everyone at the scene couldn't help but think that. Given how domestic travel has become more expensive than going abroad, what kind of financial background does one need to make such a spontaneous plan? No wonder. Sanoko didn't come? She came. We all did. But after the hot spring bath, Sanoko wouldn't get off the massage chair. I wanted to visit my dad, so Ren came with me. Ran explained with a smile. Her very thorough and logical explanation managed to calm Kogro down a bit. Fortunately, it wasn't what he had feared. Edogawa Konan, who noticed Kogro's suspicious expression, rolled his eyes. Seriously, he's dating Sanoko. What are you thinking, old man? Even with Sanoko and Ran's relationship, that kind of misunderstanding makes no sense. Ren, this is the 3rd time we've met, Mr. Mori. Ren spoke quietly, sounding a bit shy. Though his voice wasn't loud, every word was clear. Ah, hello. After greeting them, Ren glanced around at everyone present and added apologetically, this might sound rude, but Mr. Mori's class reunion might encounter some trouble. Trouble? Kogro frowned. He didn't get what Ren meant. Ren clearly noticed his unease, but didn't offer any explanation. He simply made a gesture with his hand, and a tarot card appeared in his palm. The death god has came to this class reunion. Mr. Mori, I believe your gathering might soon be tainted with blood. Huh? Kogro's expression shifted dramatically. His temper flared and he almost jumped to his feet. Dad. But just before he could fully rise, Ran pushed him back into his seat. Ran can be blunt sometimes, but his readings are really accurate. Just listen to what he has to say first. Mori Kogro, forced back into his chair, felt like his shoulder had been yanked down by a crane. The sudden force made it ache. But he didn't have time to dwell on how his daughter had suddenly gotten so strong. He could only focus on what this arrogant young man in front of him had just said. All right. I'll listen. Chapter 258, This is fortune-telling? He was scared. When he was young, he was afraid of his wife. Now that he's older, he is afraid of his daughter. Seeing Kogro completely powerless against Ran and even being physically suppressed, his old classmates were all trying hard not to laugh. At this moment, their interest shifted toward Ran's friend. This young man had boldly declared that the god of death had come to this class reunion, and even predicted it would inevitably be stained with blood. Now being pinned down by his own daughter, Kogro could only suppress his rising temper. He wasn't the type to joke around with old classmates. All right, kid. Tell me, why would you say that? Perhaps due to his years as a detective, Kogro's gaze sharpened significantly at that moment. Spirituality reflects one's spirit. A police officer's spirit differs from that of ordinary people, and this sharpness couldn't be easily compared. Ren clearly felt this pressure, but he wasn't surprised. It's simply a conclusion drawn from my understanding of divination. Divination? As soon as he heard the word divination, Kogro's face showed obvious disgust. Isn't that just psychological profiling? Saying something like this in a situation like ours, kid, you're just asking to get punched. Ren didn't object at all. True. If it were just casual fortune-telling, you really shouldn't say such bold things. But the kind of divination I do is a bit different. Mr. Mori doesn't need to believe it. I didn't offer this to force belief. If Mr. Mori doesn't want to know, I'll stop here. Based on his previous experience with Haramoto Natsu, Ren chose to go with a nonchalant approach again. Of course, if the party involved doesn't want to know or understand, then he'll respect their wishes and say no more. Respecting people's choices is important. Playing hard to get? That's what Kogro saw in Ren's attitude. What kind of divination could be so different? At this point, Kogro couldn't help feeling a bit curious. Dad, it's fine, right? Just let Ren do a reading for you. Ren, who stood behind him, was getting anxious. Her father didn't understand Ren's ability, but she did. Ren's divination wasn't like those random stall readings outside train stations. His readings actually worked. As soon as Ren said that, Ren was already convinced something would happen at this reunion. If they had Ren perform a reading now, maybe they'd get a clear answer. The Hitamoto incident had only happened last week. Alright, fine. Being pushed by his daughter, Kogro reluctantly set aside his bias and at least decided to see what the kid was capable of. Since you've already said something that serious, if you can't back it up, I won't go easy on a brat who talks big. In response, Ren simply smiled, walked to the square table nearby, and lightly tapped the man sitting there. Sir, may I ask you to move? Oh, of course. Amora Jun moved aside, and after thanking him, Ren sat down. With a slight hand motion, a deck of tarot cards appeared before the eyes of everyone present. Oh. One card wasn't that impressive, but a full deck definitely made an impact. Ren then began shuffling them casually. During this brief moment, he looked at Kogro. So, Mr. Mori, do you want to know about the murderer or the victim? You're really sure something's going to happen at my class reunion? If you know, why not just say it? The murderer and the deceased both have the right to choose. The future isn't set in stone. If my words can lead them to change their minds, maybe that's the best outcome. So I won't say the final answer. That response genuinely surprised Kogro. Even the murderer and victim have a chance to change. If what you say is true, then I agree with you. All the people here were his college classmates. He didn't want to believe any of them would do something so extreme. In that case, tell me about the victim. Alright, the victim. Ren stopped shuffling and drew 3 cards from the deck. Upright Death. Upright Devil. Reversed World. The deceased suffered from a serious condition known as depression for a long time. Their mental state was extremely unstable. This condition stemmed from their original family. The deceased had been physically abused. Although they resisted, it left a permanent psychological scar. Half a year ago, their condition worsened. They began to show signs of mania. The combination of depression and mania pushed things further into chaos. And the root cause behind all of this was a problem in their personal romantic relationship. As soon as Ren finished speaking, the room fell completely silent. No one laughed anymore. This wasn't like any fortune-telling they had ever heard. With just a few cards, Ren had disclosed deeply personal details of someone's life. He not only pinpointed experiences but also identified the underlying issues and even the exact timeline of the mental deterioration. Everyone looked stunned. But the person Ren was describing, they understood everything immediately. Perhaps, this reading wasn't a joke. At that moment, Edagawa Conan snapped out of his shock. This was too specific. Is this really divination? This is more like a direct profile. Subconsciously glancing at Kogro, he saw that the old man was also frozen in place. Whether or not it was truly divination was beside the point now. It was clear that Ren had named someone already. Was this the result of prior investigation? But Conan immediately dismissed that idea. No. Even if someone had looked into things beforehand, certain details couldn't be found through standard intel. The original family issues, the abuse, the mental health timeline. Especially calling out the changes that began half a year ago, all of it was far too precise. How could anyone know such intimate, hidden details? No surface-level investigation could uncover that. Even Edagawa Conan didn't have an answer for this. Chapter 259, The Murderer and the Dead. Kogro forced himself out of his daze and wiped his face with both hands. His mind, which usually only kicked into high gear when dealing with a major case, finally began working rapidly. Amora had always been an optimistic guy. Rather than depression, his biggest issue was his introverted personality. And judging from his build, He didn't look like someone who had been violated. But that naive assumption was quickly dismissed. The abuse likely didn't happen during college. It could have happened earlier. Possibly during childhood, when the victim had no means to resist. So, it wasn't limited to women. Anyone here, aside from himself, could be the one. Kogro could only be certain that he hadn't experienced anything like that himself. So, the deceased couldn't be him. As for identifying who had depression, that wasn't something easily judged from the outside. The more deeply depressed someone is, the more normal they might appear. The more serious the psychological issues, the less likely they are to be visible. Judging mental health based on appearance alone was foolish. There were clues. Some of them very clear. But those were things only the person themselves would know. Kogro had no way of identifying the victim based on that information. After all, these were his college classmates, not from high school, junior high, or elementary school. They didn't know each other that deeply. Kid, I can tell you're not joking. At this point, Kogro was certain. The boy in front of him wasn't playing around. No one would joke to this extent. You didn't investigate this in advance? This wasn't just his question. It was on everyone's mind. Ren didn't answer right away but instead posed a question of his own: what would I gain from doing that? Everyone present paused. Then their expressions darkened. The answer was clear. There was nothing to be gained. People might go to great lengths for personal gain, but no one does something completely pointless without any benefit. Because there was no benefit, investigating in advance made no sense. Moreover, even if you had detailed personal data, it wouldn't be enough to accurately guess who the deceased was. If it were really that easy to figure out, there wouldn't be so many real-world murder cases with unidentified victims and suspects. Given all the uncertainty, pre-investigation was meaningless. So was this really the result of divination? Edogawa Conan, who had been following along quietly, began to waver in his stance. There were simply too many unknowns. He understood clearly that an investigation wouldn't yield this kind of information. Unless you were the one planning the murder. But could that really be the case? Choosing a murder case to take place at the reunion of Kogro's classmates, and deliberately targeting them. That would be a bold provocation. And would the person behind it willingly stand out and claim to be a seer? That would be pure suicide. Besides, there was no motive or reason for such a thing. Conan agreed with what Ren had said earlier. About benefits. No one acts without reason, and there's no motive to fabricate this scenario. He had a general idea of who Ren was. A classmate at Titan High School, not exactly sociable. He lived frugally, known as a model for the work-study program. Conan couldn't imagine why someone like that would go through the trouble of plotting a murder. And if this really was some sort of plan, it would mean the person behind it bore a grudge against Kogro. Which made it even less likely. After thinking for a while, Conan concluded that the simplest answer might be the correct one. Divination. But it was precisely this thought that made his brain feel like it was overheating. He was a rational, logic-driven detective. Would it make sense for someone like him to believe in divination? Mr. Mori, are you still interested in the murderer? Yes, of course. The details about the deceased were too obscure. Kogro couldn't figure out who it was. He needed to hear about the murderer's reading. Maybe he could find some clues that way. At this point, his expression had become much more serious than before. He was starting to trust the results of the divination. Ren simply smiled, then began reshuffling the tarot deck. He drew 3 new cards. Reversed Lovers. Reversed Sunday Upright Devil. The murderer had an 18-year-long romantic relationship that ended in failure. About 6 months ago, due to the long-standing lack of reciprocation, he finally gave up and began seeing someone else through introductions from others. But what followed was relentless harassment of his fiancée and intense threats from his former lover. Eventually, the murderer made a difficult decision. He plans to eliminate that person once and for all at this reunion. Wow! A lot of information was revealed about the murderer. But the most critical details were still hidden. Mori Kogro took a deep breath. An 18-year romance, now broken. But the identities of the two parties remained unclear. Even someone like Hayashiro Yukio, who was married, couldn't be ruled out. If this divination pointed to an affair, then everything would become completely ambiguous. A lot of personal details were provided, but the key parts were omitted. Still, one thing was now clear to Kogro. If this divination was true, then something major was about to happen at this class reunion. That made Kogro's expression grow darker. Kid, can't you say more in the divination? Ren shook his head calmly. This is something known only to the murderer and the deceased. At this moment, they both know who the other is. For me, this is an opportunity for both sides to make a new choice. This is a choice grounded in human nature. And if the result doesn't change, that, too, is human nature. Chapter 260, cannot change fate, giving both parties a chance to re-choose. Edagawa Conan could clearly hear Ren's detached tone. To him, Ren felt a bit pretentious, even acting from too lofty a height. There was a definite air of a charlatan in the way he spoke. It was very much like a seer, deliberately speaking in half-truths and leaving things vague. Edagawa Conan didn't think there was anything inherently wrong with that. After all, that's what seers are supposed to do. But what made him feel uncomfortable was that the person had already identified the deceased and the murderer, yet still insisted on playing the role of a riddle-spewing prophet. Still, Conan temporarily put aside this discomfort. After all, everything Ren said was based on a kind of divination that he found hard to believe. He couldn't get too emotional about what the other party said, especially since it was all rooted in divination. Predicting both the deceased and the murderer in advance. Wasn't that a bit too strange? Judging by how openly Ren was speaking, it was easy to guess his intention. He wanted to change the fates of both the deceased and the murderer. It was just that Ren brought up the subject in a roundabout way, giving the deceased and the murderer the chance to change their own fate, instead of directly naming them. Perhaps this too was a form of offering them a choice. Edagawa Conan could probably understand Ren's approach, but he felt that doing it this way might ultimately lead to a fixed outcome that couldn't be changed. Not revealing the name. Is that also to give them room for redemption? Kogro's mind, which had already been racing, quickly caught on to the reason why the boy in front of him was being so indirect. Ren didn't deny it. This was also his way of offering them a chance to choose. At the same time, he began to put away the tarot cards laid out on the table. Mr. Mori, you can treat my words as a joke or as a revelation. But I believe that forcing others to make choices is meaningless. Only by truly changing oneself can one alter a predetermined fate. It's a pity, but I believe Mr. Mori has lost the opportunity to get answers through questioning. The moment I revealed the content of the divination, the deceased and the murderer should have already made up their minds and will no longer speak about their situation. If you want to change the fate of those two people, Mr. Mori, you'll need to invest more time. Maybe you can talk to your old classmates, but I suggest you gain enough understanding to judge if someone is deliberately hiding something. Oh, right, a piece of advice for Mr. Mori. Don't look for clues purely from a detective's perspective. Sometimes the clues you uncover might lead to fatal consequences. The only way to change someone's fate is to confront the person directly and speak clearly. As he spoke, Ren had already packed away all the tarot cards. They vanished from his hands like a magic trick. After giving those reminders, Ren stood up from his seat and gave a slight nod to Amora June, who had just made way for him. Thank you. You're welcome. Amora June finally came to his senses and subconsciously returned the gesture. Let's go, Ren. Okay. Dad, I'll come back later. As Ren finished speaking, Ran, who had been pressing her father down into his seat, immediately followed after him. The two of them quickly walked out of the hot spring hotel. Ran didn't speak until they were completely out of sight of the building. Ran. The deceased is Aunt Yumi, right? Yes. Was it the sound of her heartbeat? And her breathing? Aunt Yumi's pupils shrank, and she bit her lip tightly when she heard your words. The changes were subtle, but noticeable. Ran had confirmed the deceased's identity almost instantly from the rapid heartbeat. But what shocked her more than the deceased's identity was who the murderer was. The murderer is Uncle Nakamaki? Ren nodded slightly. Then, Uncle Nakamaki and Aunt Yumi have been in love for the past 18 years? Ran gasped in disbelief. Her tone was full of confusion. Does Uncle Nakamaki know about Aunt Yumi's mental illness? Ren shook his head gently. He doesn't know. He doesn't? They've been dating for 18 years and he still doesn't know Aunt Yumi has mental problems? Ran couldn't believe it. Ren smiled faintly, holding Ran's hand. Ran, if something like an almost violation happened to you in the past, would you tell me about it? Of course. I wouldn't. Ah. Ran instinctively tried to hide her own past trauma, and her subconscious answer made her realize something. So Aunt Yumi has been hiding her past from Uncle Nakamaki? That kind of thing is the greatest stain on any woman's life. Even if she managed to fend off the attack in the end, how could she speak of it? It's a scar. Even if it heals, it still leaves a mark. Ren understood this far too well. After experiencing something like that, a woman can't speak of it lightly, not without emotional baggage. Ren couldn't help but ask, then does that mean, if you help them talk it through, Aunt Yumi and Uncle Nakamaki's ending might change? But that hope was quickly shattered by Ren's cold response. It's impossible to change. The outcome has already been decided. The moment that man made up his mind to settle things once and for all, there was no hope left between them. And just now, the last bit of hope that woman had was completely shattered. She can no longer face him. Ran was struck hard by the harsh truth in his words. But she also understood that what Ren said had doomed the two to a path of no return. After Ren calmed down a little, Ren continued the conversation. For 18 years, she gave everything to the relationship. But the resentment he feels now is just as deep. 18 years of unreciprocated love pushed him to give up. And right after he gave up, the fiancée he'd just been engaged to for half a year received a threatening letter. She rejected his proposal. After he gave up on his own, his current fiancée was threatened. Whether she has a mental illness or not, that man's patience has already reached its limit. This isn't either of their faults. It's fate that created this situation that can no longer be undone. From an outsider's perspective, neither the man nor the woman had done anything wrong. But the events that occurred between them led to an irreversible outcome. The fate of separation cannot be changed. But the fate of one dying and one being imprisoned might still be. Chapter 261, Fate Observation Diary. Back at the Hot Spring Hotel, Ran recounted everything that happened during her visit. Everyone who heard the story and understood the situation of the two people involved agreed with what Ren said. The separation between these two was inevitable. Originally, the two of them were headed for a future where one would die and the other be imprisoned, but now, there was a completely different option. The best outcome for them is to clarify everything at this class reunion and then completely cut ties. From now on, they should stay out of each other's lives and pursue their own paths. Sansan Inagi offered her view on what she believed to be the ideal resolution. Yeah, that's probably the best result. The man clearly has a goal and a plan for the future after giving up. Honestly, after rejecting his proposal, she still interferes in his life. Her mental state is seriously problematic, Kaguya added. Having read several books on mental illness, Kaguya had a basic understanding of such conditions. It was clear to her that the woman's mental state had seriously deteriorated. Repeatedly rejecting the man's proposal might be due to psychological trauma from childhood. But even after he gave up, she continued to disturb the life of his fiancé. That kind of behavior is not something a mentally healthy person would do. Her actions are simply inconsistent. Maybe she can no longer control herself when emotionally unstable, Kaguya concluded. She was quite certain that the woman's retaliation against the man's fiancé was no longer within her control, and that it was a clear manifestation of serious psychological instability. Until her mental state is stabilized or at least brought under control, it's best to keep a distance from her. If she's capable of harassing the man's fiancé, then anyone who gets too close might be seriously hurt. Mental illness doesn't follow reason. Though Kaguya hadn't directly dealt with any psychiatric patients, she had learned from books that mentally ill individuals often perceive the world differently than the rest of us. It's this distorted perception that causes their behavior to appear so abnormal. Ren probably didn't reveal everything just to give both parties some final dignity. If things end here, then nothing more needs to be said. Agreed, Sanoko nodded at Kaguya's conclusion. If Ren had exposed her identity directly, both of them would likely be driven out of their former social circles. Before things reach a point of no return, if they can both calm down and think clearly, there's still a chance to turn things around. In this sense, Ren had always been remarkably restrained. Suddenly, Sanoko looked around. Ren, where's Ren? He said he needed time to write today's diary. Diary? Do you think he's going to mention our swimsuits today? The girls relaxing in the massage area, sipping tea in the massage chairs, suddenly became self-conscious. Especially about the swimsuits Sanoko mentioned. They were, after all, the highlight of the hot spring trip. To be honest, they were all a little curious. Suddenly, all their diaries began to vibrate. Instinctively, each of them summoned their diaries and began to read the latest entry. Diary, my first hot spring trip. How should I put it? From the very start, the location they picked already exceeded the imagination of a normal person like me. This hot spring hotel doesn't even seem to exist on geode maps, and yet its interior setup was far more luxurious than I expected. Maybe I shouldn't feel so intimidated, but now I get how Klein must have felt when he first arrived at Backland's most dazzling gem. In a way, it's similar to what I'm experiencing as someone who's now seen such wealth. Yeah, I'm probably a lot like Klein. We're both poor and at the bottom of society. Now that I think about it, Sansan is pretty special. I remember her usual expenses weren't covered by her family but came from her own earnings in the stock market. That genius girl is truly abnormal. I'm starting to feel like I'm surrounded by a group of Miss Audreys. Once I calmed down, I realized that the most eye-catching part of this hot spring trip wasn't the hotel, but the hot spring itself. The open-air hot spring, and their swimsuits. Although I'm not sure if it's vulgar to write this, their swimsuits today really were beautiful. Also, just a personal suggestion, but maybe don't wear them like that in public, except for one person. I could mostly imagine everyone's swimsuit styles. Hayasaka's case really caught me off guard. The story mentioned sheep pads, and this part feels a little off. Well, Thinking about a girl's figure like this might be kind of vulgar too. Better to move on from the hot spring topic, or I'll start having some inappropriate thoughts. Maintain self-control. Another matter of note is Mori Kogro's class reunion. On the way there, I sensed that it wasn't going to be a simple get-together. Although my memory of the story is fuzzy, I retain some fragments of particularly dramatic events. Of course, I could always confirm more details through divination. Thankfully, the accuracy of my divination has improved. This time, both the man and the woman in the story had their own problems. The woman's trauma haunted her for life. Even in relationships, her memory caused her mental stress and hypersensitivity. That's why she kept rejecting the man's proposals. He really was devoted. Otherwise, their relationship wouldn't have lasted 18 years. But honestly, they're getting old. From 20 to 38 years old. That's a long stretch. Frankly, in a few more years, they might both be out of steam. It's not wrong for them to want to marry. However, what should have been a simple breakup became another trigger for the woman, pushing her mental state to the second stage. She became unstable and manic. Sigh. I can only say, it was fate that brought them to this. Maybe this time, I'll say something that can change their destiny. For me, that would be a meaningful observation. I'm really curious if their tragedy can be avoided. Chapter 262, Promotion. After finishing his diary entry for the day, Ren sat quietly in his room for about 10 minutes before preparing for the lottery draw. A large spinning wheel appeared, and as it spun, the entire wheel began to rotate rapidly. The process took a while, but the result was eventually revealed. Lord of Mysteries, acquired Sequence 8, Trickmaster. The door came first, which isn't a bad outcome. The door path's power spike is at Sequence 6, which is similar to the situation with the error path. So Ren didn't care much about whether the door or error path came first. He took out the maple leaf coin for a divination. You can proceed with the promotion now. The maple leaf coin flipped high into the air and landed quickly, with the letter side facing up. After several divinations to confirm the result, Ren picked up the bottle containing the magic potion, uncorked it, and drank it down. His tongue registered the taste. Why is it spicy? Ren looked suspiciously at the bottle. There was nothing wrong with the potion itself. After drinking it, he could clearly feel his spirituality expanding. After careful inspection, there were no signs of abnormalities. Everything felt natural, and even. 2/3 digested. Although it wasn't like the clown potion that melted instantly, this digestion rate was still rather fast. Then, Ren suddenly realized something. Does my usual manipulation of tarot cards count as a type of magic trick? He thought about how he used Sefirah Castle to draw tarot cards and the River of Everdarkness to change the cards. Could it be? Disguising these effects using Sefirah is also a form of stage magic? Using 2 Sephirahs for performance is definitely a bit overkill. From that perspective, it made sense that the digestion was already 2/3 complete. That level of digestion could indeed be attributed to the combined influence of the Sefirah and his own unconscious performances. Not a bad thing at all. Snap. With a snap of his fingers, a blinding white flash filled the room for a brief moment. The flash snap. It only works for an instant, but it can cause temporary blindness. The better the eyesight, the worse the impact. It's similar to the flash amulet I made, but this is the Trickmaster's innate ability. It's not a one-time use, though its effectiveness is still weaker than the amulet. In summary, it was convenient, though not quite as practical as the flash amulet. Well, it is the Trickmaster path, after all. This path's abilities are mostly utility-focused, suitable for performances and tricks, but not very effective in real combat. However, when paired with a weapon, it could still provide solid support. The door path's offensive capabilities in the early stages are indeed lacking. It's mostly about surviving rather than fighting. Even so, Ren wasn't disappointed. The door path is slow and steady, and its strength builds over time. In the early stages, it might be the weakest in combat, but once it reaches Sequence 0 and ascends to True God status, it can shatter space itself, dealing devastating spatial damage. The weaker the early stage combat ability, the more overwhelming the late stage abilities become. This is true of the door, error, and fool paths. The Trickmaster ended up last. In fact, the Trickmaster's utility is even greater than the Magician's. Charm, eloquence, mental interference, and misleading thought. These are all very practical, especially in conversations, where the Trickmaster path shines. In Ren's current role as an observer of others' fates, the Trickmaster's powers are quite relevant. Ren relaxed and calmed his expanding spirituality. However, it would still take time to fully master the newly grown spirituality. It just so happened that he had time to adjust now. Doing a few divinations regarding the situation over there might help him gain better control of this new part of his spirituality. He made a small adjustment to his state, then sat in the chair and began shuffling his tarot cards. He slowly drew 3 cards. Reversed Tower, Upright Judgment, Upright World. Oh. This is good news. The Tower is a terrible card whether upright or reversed. It's nearly as bad as the Death card. The Reversed Tower represents 4 warnings of separation and romantic crisis, meaning emotional detachment. Judgment represents openness and good news, while the World represents success and mission completion. These 3 cards together form a complete good news combination. Especially for the couple who had both love and hate between them, this separation was the best possible outcome. Previously, the divination for the couple's fate pointed toward death and imprisonment. But now, it had shifted to a straightforward breakup. This was the biggest shift for a couple whose future had looked grim. My words did have an effect. Ren smiled, put away the tarot cards, shuffled again, and drew 3 more cards. Reversed High Priestess, Upright Wheel of Fortune, Upright Judgment. The woman's psychological condition is still serious, but it's been relieved somewhat. She even shows signs of recovery from the extreme 3rd stage. It seems that ending the relationship helped her grow, allowing her to realize the severity of her psychological issues. As for the gentleman, Reversed Temperance, Upright Moon, Reversed World. A marriage formed through blind dating isn't a good match, and emotional turbulence remains. Plus, the harassment from before has left lingering effects. These issues have led to incompatibility within the marriage. This unstable post-marriage relationship means their future will be more like putting up with each other than truly living together. We can't expect too much from the final result. Still, the future that once seemed fixed has now changed. After getting this answer, Ren didn't put away his tarot cards. Instead, he leaned back into the soft sofa. Taking part in a story and trying to change something isn't a bad thing for me. Whether it's from the perspective of human nature or for gaining returns through the diary. Chapter 263, Separation and Return. As night fell, the hotel seemed unusually quiet. It was partly because they'd been exhausted by Ren's revelations, and Kogoro had spent the entire afternoon trying to talk to them. Kogoro sure is enthusiastic. Yumi Horikoshi looked slightly troubled. That guy's always been like this, you know that. Nakamaki Kazushi laughed carefreely beside her, though his smile held a trace of bitterness. I really didn't expect you to have such serious psychological issues. Same here. I didn't expect you to be thinking of getting rid of me entirely. Yumi shot back without hesitation. But she wasn't really angry anymore. In truth, she had often thought of suicide in the past. Her emotional instability and the tendency to hurt others might have come from an unconscious desire for self-destruction. Now that things were out in the open and the difficult words had been spoken, she actually felt somewhat relieved. My thoughts were extreme. I just wanted to change the direction of my life. My fiancé agreed too. Also, don't pretend you're innocent. I didn't even bring up your harassment over the last 6 months. Kazushi looked a bit embarrassed when she pointed that out. He truly had thought about ending things entirely. But it had been Yumi's behavior that pushed him to that point. These past 6 months. I was confused too. Weren't we all? For both of them, the last 6 months had been a whirlwind of emotional chaos. Under such high mental stress, they had made all the wrong choices. Neither of them wanted to dwell on the past any longer. Yumi looked up at the night sky, where stars were still visible. It felt like there was still hope glimmering in her otherwise dark life, and her mood lifted just a little. She began reflecting on the past 6 months. She had always hoped her partner would be someone she loved, someone who could accept the parts of her that were hard to face. But she had been afraid that revealing her past would lead to rejection. At the same time, her past experiences had made her deeply wary of men. It was because of that wariness that she could never bring herself to accept Kazushi's marriage proposal. The closer he pushed for marriage, the more withdrawn and unstable she became. When he finally walked away for good, her nerves snapped. Her mind turned manic and violent, and the dark thought that if I can't have it, I'll destroy it took root deep in her heart. Now that she looked back calmly, it terrified her. I really should see a doctor. Yumi wasn't sure if she'd ever had that realization before, but she knew now. Under that manic influence, she would have continued acting impulsively, following thoughts born of pain. What surprised her most was that today, in that moment of conflict, she didn't feel any mania at all. Instead, her heart was calm. She didn't know how it happened, but the spiritual peace she felt right now was the most relaxed she had been in a long time. Because of that tranquility, she was finally able to think clearly and acknowledge that her mental state was unstable, and that she needed proper treatment. Well, that's enough of this topic. Kogoro's going to catch on if we're gone too long. Turning back, Yumi made her decision. To part ways with her former self. This should be the last time we meet. From now on, let's stay out of each other's lives. After learning that Kazushi had once considered killing her, Yumi understood that her mental condition had affected many people. Regardless of how much her mental state influenced others, The moment Kazushi had such thoughts, it meant their relationship had reached its end. The best outcome now was to go their separate ways and never cross paths again. Yeah. Kazushi didn't try to stop her. After 18 years of love, he had only now learned about Yumi's traumatic past. From a friend of Kogro's daughter, no less. Maybe he should have realized it earlier. But there's no such thing as maybe in the real world. As Yumi turned the corner, she bumped into someone. It was Amora, the most honest and sincere person in their old judo club. But right now, his face was filled with sadness. Yumi immediately realized that Amora had overheard her conversation with Kazushi. She chuckled. Amora, I'm not dead, so don't look so miserable. Didn't Kogro already guess everything from your expression? Yumi, your mental health. Amora still looked at her with concern. Well, I think it can be treated. After this class reunion, I plan to see a psychologist and start therapy. Though I might have to rely on medication going forward. Yumi didn't think it was a big deal. Mental illness needs to be addressed. After experiencing this rare moment of peace, she could no longer accept being the unstable version of herself. Even if it meant relying on medication, she refused to be ruled by emotions for the rest of her life. Mental illness could be treated. It just required long-term care. As for how long it would take, Yumi didn't know. For 18 years, she never once believed she had a problem. After such a long delay, who could say how long recovery would take? Yumi, would you go out with me? The sudden confession caught Yumi completely off guard. She turned and looked at Amora, who seemed anxious after saying something so bold. She couldn't help but laugh. Amora, I'm not a good woman. I'm not as innocent as I seem. I toyed with someone's feelings for 18 years. I know. I knew you and Nakamaki were dating back in college. Amora's words stunned Yumi even more. She stood in silence for a moment. Amora. Are you serious? Yeah. From the moment we first met. I had a crush on you. Yumi never imagined that Amora, always so quiet and unassuming, had such feelings for her. You still say that after hearing everything I've been through? I don't want to see you suffer. I didn't know before, but now. I don't want Yumi to end up like that. Yumi could feel the sincerity in his words. I don't know when my condition will get better. That's okay. I want to stay with you. Yumi sighed and looked away. Then stay with me for a while. If you get tired of it, leave whenever you want. I'm not a good woman. Chapter 264, Fireworks Festival and Dinner. It was already 6 in the evening. The sky had gone dark, and stars shimmered brightly above. Tourists from across Tochigi Prefecture were preparing for the night ahead. Tonight, a celebration was being held in Tochigi Prefecture, with a grand fireworks display as the highlight. Visitors to the hot spring town were already making their way toward the lake to find a good viewing spot. Of course, Ren and the others were no exception. However, rather than squeeze into the crowds, the hot spring hotel on the mountainside actually had a scenic overlook near the summit, offering a better vantage point for enjoying the show. To reach this upper-level observation deck, they had to go through the corridor leading to the open-air hot spring. The deck was spacious enough to accommodate over 20 people. A square table sat in the center, with seating on both sides. The ceiling lights were dim enough to highlight the food on the table without interfering with the night view outside. The environment here is really nice. Upon arriving at the deck, Ren walked toward the edge. The surrounding area had no lighting, so guests could focus entirely on the view without distractions. The location was perfect. From here, you could see nearly the entire hot spring town, including the celebration grounds near the lake at the foot of the mountain. Large crowds had already gathered there to secure spots for the fireworks. As long as your eyesight was decent, you could take in the entire town from this spot. During the day the view wasn't particularly impressive, but at night, the lights from the town glittered like stars, making the scenery breathtaking. Right? Cheko leaned on the railing, her eyes sparkling as she admired the view. Even though we're a little far from the fireworks, it's better this way. You can only truly appreciate them from a distance. This place is perfect? And we get to eat while watching the fireworks. Wow! This place is amazing. I've already decided. I'm coming here again next time. As she spoke, her gaze shifted to Ren standing next to her. Feeling her eyes on him, Ren didn't object. He also really enjoyed this hot spring trip. You should talk to Kaguya about that. She's the one who planned this trip. Ren pointed to Kaguya, who was sitting on a chair behind them. Chika immediately shifted her attention, and with her usual sweet and playful voice, she asked, Kaguya-chan. Can we come again next time? Kaguya's face twitched. Once again, she was reminded of how shameless this girl was. Especially with that ridiculous body where all her nutrition seemed concentrated in her chest. When she leaned in and rubbed against her like this, it made Kaguya even more irritated. But there was no way to push this clingy monster away, so she replied with restraint, "Forget about going again anytime soon. We just had a hot spring trip. We should visit other places next. You can go for hot springs in spring, autumn, and winter, but in summer, you should go to the beach. You don't want every vacation to be at a hot spring, do you? No matter how enjoyable a hot spring trip is, it would feel dull if done too often." Actually, Kaguya herself preferred the idea of going to the beach. The problem was, whether it was the beach or the hot springs, she wasn't exactly confident about showing off her figure. And it would be too easy for someone else to draw Ren's attention. That's true. Chica nodded. She would also get bored going to the same place every time. Every season deserved a different destination. While thinking about it, she glanced around at their small group and couldn't help but smile. No matter where we go, this group will never be boring. That was for sure. The Occult Research Club wasn't about ghosts or supernatural things. It was the group itself that was the real mystery. They did completely different things nearly every weekend, sometimes even during regular classes. So, there was no worry about ever being bored with this group. "Everyone, it's time to start eating." Once the waiter had finished setting the table, dinner officially began. Everyone gathered around the long table. As Ren sat down, he noticed that dinner tonight seemed to be his favorite cuisine. It was different from lunch. Was it just to match the time of day with a change in style? Or... He subconsciously glanced toward Hayasaka, and happened to meet her gaze. Her lips moved slightly. "Do you like it?" After catching her silent question, Ren realized she had arranged it. So when he craved it, he'd usually make it himself. He could manage thanks to those step-by-step recipe books. Still, while he could cook it, there was no telling how close the taste and texture came to the real thing. "Thanks, love." Hayasaka understood the shape of his lips and smiled sweetly, heart full of warmth. But just after Ren gave Hayasaka his thanks, he felt a sharp pain under the table. Ren fell silent for a moment, then turned to look at Chica, who was sitting next to him. She was casually looking elsewhere, but the guilty expression on her face said it all. You can't hide from someone with the abilities of a spectator. No wonder people said spectators had to be nerfed. It made too much sense. Apparently, no girl could escape the clutches of jealousy. Ren now fully understood the pain of being too popular. Every girl's envy had to be carefully managed. Bang! Just then, the first firework burst in the night sky. Everyone turned to watch. Ren slowly pulled his gaze back and, looking around at the others, raised his glass. The fireworks show has started. Let's begin dinner. Chapter 265, Unexpected Invasion. The brilliant fireworks exploded in the night sky, illuminating the darkness in an instant. They were breathtaking when they bloomed, but once they faded, only the scent of the smoke lingered in the air. It was like an observation deck that lost its purpose after dinner. 3 hours later, it was bedtime, and everyone had already returned to their rooms to rest. Spending the entire day playing had worn them out. Too much had happened in a single day, and they all needed time to recover. Of course, even Ren was no exception. He, too, needed rest. Today had been a very intense experience for him. He had advanced in the sequence, but this was only the beginning of the path. He still needed to calm himself down. Wearing a bathrobe, Ren stood in front of the glass door that looked out from his room, gazing into the peaceful night. His mood was surprisingly tranquil. The joy of successfully advancing had gradually settled. In fact, he could have used the comfort of the river of eternal darkness to soothe his mind and spirit, but today, something about Sefirah Castle had felt odd. That strange sensation compelled him to calm down naturally. His spirit had suddenly felt a strong resonance. The powerful reaction from Sefirah Castle caused Ren's projection to stabilize for a moment before entering Sefirah Castle. His consciousness entered, but this time, he didn't find himself inside Sefirah Castle. Instead, he stood before a door shrouded in fog. Ren cautiously placed his hand on the door. A strange intuition caused the corners of his lips to curve slightly. Interesting. He sensed that this fog-covered door was part of Sefirah Castle. Or rather, it was a part that had been separated from the whole. Source essence possessed a self-repairing nature. Even when torn, it could eventually restore itself to a complete form. However, even if separated, the only person who could control it was the original owner. Moreover, the existence capable of tearing apart Source essence wasn't just a pillar. It was an original far beyond that level. So, was the Sefirah Castle he received actually a torn-off portion? With that thought in mind, Ren gently pushed open the door before him. Ka. Despite being made from Sefirah Castle's fog, the door creaked open like an old, unused gate. Behind it appeared a space that resembled Sefirah Castle. Similar, yet different. But what caught Ren off guard was that several people were already seated at a long table, and the man in the main seat, though his features were obscured by Sefirah Castle's fog, was somehow visible to Ren. A surge of inexplicable excitement and joy nearly made Ren burst out in uncontrollable laughter. He could have restrained himself using the clown's persona, but he didn't. He laughed freely like a clown. Interesting. This is really interesting. At that moment, his laughter was like the whispering of an ancient god. It made everyone present feel intensely disturbed, like they might lose control at any moment. The man at the head of the table felt it most strongly. He was shocked by the sudden arrival of a stranger above the grey fog, even more by the shift in this person's emotions, which triggered a sense of imminent breakdown. Even under the suppression of the grey fog, that oppressive sensation was still unmistakable. He felt a disturbing stir in his blood, and his spirituality seemed ready to burst. However, it wasn't because he was losing control due to a lack of spirituality. This situation was entirely different from anything he had experienced before. I apologize for intruding on your gathering. Like a familiar guest, Ren smiled and walked over, casually pulling out the chair opposite the main seat and sitting down. Though it was a sudden intrusion, it's been quite an interesting experience for me. As he finished speaking, the pressure that had nearly driven the others to the brink faded. Not only the man, but everyone else present felt significantly more at ease. The Fool, Justice, and the Hanged Man. Just started. No, looks like it's your second time. Ren could clearly see, with his spiritual vision, that a worm had appeared deep within the Fool's ethereal body. A clear sign of becoming a beyonder. The man appeared slightly confused by the statement. He sensed that this intruder was oddly familiar with him. Or with them. Let me give you a belated introduction. My name is Amamiya Ren. But the man frowned. He hadn't caught the name clearly. Excuse me, sir, I don't think I heard your name just now. Miss Justice quickly raised her hand to voice her confusion. The Hanged Man remained silent, but it was clear he hadn't heard the name either. Well done, Miss Justice, the man silently praised in his heart. You didn't hear it. Ren murmured, resting his chin on his hand. Since you didn't hear it, forget it. Maybe my name isn't something you're meant to hear, or perhaps someone deliberately blocked it. It doesn't really matter. Since you don't know my name, just use a code name. Joker. Suddenly remembering something, Ren added, you should be able to remember how the code name sounds, but I can't convert its pronunciation into the written words you recognize. Don't be surprised. I don't know your language at all. Most likely, Sefirah Castle directly translated my thoughts into a form your minds could comprehend. But that's convenient. It means fewer misunderstandings. After his explanation, Ren looked at the 3 original members of the Tarot Club seated before him, smiling faintly. I thought it would happen later, but I didn't expect it to be this time. It's quite the surprise for me. It's a shame we can't meet in person yet. But I'll be waiting, looking forward to the day we truly meet. Ren paused for a moment. Well, today's intrusion has been quite amusing for me, but I've still disrupted your meeting. By the way, is your gathering already over? Justice and the Hanged Man both turned to Mr. Fool, who sat in the lead seat. After a short silence, the man nodded slightly. Yes, you interrupted our gathering. Ren was briefly stunned, then smiled and apologized. Ah, I see. Sorry. I hadn't realized this was so sudden. Well, I'm not the best at many things, but I do have some skill in suppressing corruption and loss of control. How about this? As an apology, I'll give you 3 my blessing. Suppress corruption and loss of control? The Hanged Man could hardly believe what he had just heard. His expression even twitched in disbelief. Everyone knew that once corruption occurred, it was irreversible. While loss of control could occasionally be managed, corruption was nearly impossible to contain. Once tainted, there was usually no saving the person. The man's face also showed clear astonishment. Clearly, he hadn't expected anything like this. Without waiting for the trio's reaction, Ren lightly tapped the table. The fog above the ceiling instantly sank, swirling down toward the bronze table. The mist condensed into 3 talismans, each imprinted with a black hat over a red background. Ren gave them a glance, then waved his hand nonchalantly. The fog picked up the talismans and floated them over to the 3. As an apology for disturbing your gathering. Also, feel free to visit me if you have time. I'm quite interested in your stories. That'll be all for now. Do as you like. Chapter 266, Klein. After the meeting ended, Klein sat in the bathroom, deep in thought. He stared at the amulet in his hand, which looked like a toy sticker, and his mind froze for a long time. Fuck. After that long crash, he finally let out a phrase that had survived countless eras, in a tone far from gentlemanly. This sticker-like amulet can actually curb loss of control and corruption. Klein was at a loss. Because of the repeated warnings from Old Neil and Captain Dunn, he had developed a strong understanding of the dangers of losing control. so he was well aware of how terrifying it was for a beyonder. Among them, corruption was even more serious than mere loss of control. But the very thing that old Neil and Captain Dunn had said was unavoidable, unstoppable, and irreversible now seemed to have a countermeasure. And that countermeasure was currently lying quietly in his palm, looking as ordinary and childish as a toy. He hadn't believed it at first, but after the Tarot Club's weekly gathering, he performed several additional divinations above the grey fog to confirm it. Each divination showed the same result. This amulet did have the power to curb loss of control and corruption. That answer made Klein feel as if his entire worldview, newly formed in this strange world, was about to collapse. An amulet made so casually, yet capable of suppressing loss of control and corruption. It made those pioneers of the past who went mad or were corrupted seem like a cruel joke. What a bad joke. Klein felt a deep irony. He let out a slow breath to ease his mind. He needed to think about another problem now. Should I tell Captain Dunn about the amulet? There was no doubt that this amulet could greatly change the fate of beyonders. But at the same time, it could also easily expose his identity. If Mr. Hangman or Miss Justice realized the amulet came from him, then the identity he worked so hard to conceal would be revealed in an instant. But if I don't tell Captain Dunn, how can I, who just joined the Nighthawks, ever come in contact with corrupted or out-of-control beyonders? Although the divinations had already confirmed its effects, Klein still felt the need to personally verify it. The problem was how. He was just a rookie who had barely stepped into the beyonder world. How could he test it? Klein felt extremely conflicted. And what troubled him wasn't just the amulet. There was also the matter of the mysterious guest who had appeared in the grey fog. Someone he had no knowledge of at all. Just thinking about that made a chill run down his spine. There had been an uninvited guest above the grey fog. Didn't that mean his little secret could be exposed at any time? Of course, that still wasn't the most important issue. The key point was that the intruder could even influence the grey fog. Klein clearly remembered the man uttering the term Sefirah Castle. Klein wasn't sure if Sefirah Castle referred to the same mysterious space he called the grey fog. He had no way to confirm it. But his instincts told him that Sefirah Castle was the more accurate and formal name for the grey fog. Mysterious guest. Sefirah Castle. Amulet. And Joker. Others might not know, but as a transmigrator, he did. Joker was a word from a pre-transmigration language. Yet, this language system did not exist in this world at all. In fact, it was so alien that its encryption was even more complex than Chinese. The reason was simple. This world had no such text, nor any record of it. And it was exactly because of this word that Klein felt the other party might be the same kind of person as he was. All these puzzles now swirled in Klein's mind, forming a massive deadlock. Without any clues, this impasse couldn't be broken. Klein paused mid-thought. He had forgotten something important. He had forgotten it earlier, but for some reason, he suddenly remembered it now. That strange sensation. That man's voice had been like a whisper in his ear during his advancement. But even stronger. His blood boiled, and his spirituality felt like it was being pulled out of his spirit body. When that happened, Klein noticed that Mr. Hangman experienced a similar condition, while Miss Justice didn't appear to be affected at all. Perhaps, this was more evidence that Mr. Hangman was also a beyonder. Miss Justice didn't display the same symptoms. Maybe it was because she wasn't a beyonder yet. The identity of that person still needs to be explored. Looking down at the amulet in his hand, Klein felt troubled. How was he supposed to verify something like this? If he went to Captain Dunn and claimed the amulet could suppress loss of control and corruption, Dunn might think he had already gone insane. After careful consideration, Klein still didn't have a good solution. In truth, Klein also knew he could try praying to a god for help. But the real question was, would the goddess even pay attention to him? Besides, the Evernight goddess wasn't his mother. Would she really respond to a prayer like this? If she didn't, wouldn't that make things worse? After calming himself, Klein finally decided to hide the amulet for now and look for an opportunity to test it later. Just as Klein was about to put it away, the Evernight goddess was staring at the same amulet in front of her, a question mark practically floating over her head. She stared at it for a long time, but her brain simply didn't process it right away. It can suppress loss of control and corruption? Is there something wrong with Klein's minds? Normally, prayers from ordinary believers didn't attract the goddess' attention. But this time, it was the aura of Sefirah Castle that caught her notice. And the content of the prayer? The goddess was at a complete loss for words. Asking if this sticker-like amulet could curb loss of control and corruption? There were tools that could suppress loss of control, sure. But a tool that could suppress corruption? As a true god at sequence 0, how could she not know whether such tools existed? And yet, this made her all the more curious. She examined the amulet before her and let out a very unbecoming exclamation. Fuck. Chapter 267, Shake. After a brief observation, the Evernight goddess discovered that the amulet was merely a blessing. Although its outer layer carried a strong Sefirah aura, that aura held no actual power. The true source of power was the blessing within. It wasn't a boon granted by any known deity, and the nature of the being who cast it was extremely vague. Even as a true god, she couldn't trace it back. The only thing she could determine was that the amulet was a tool built with a blessing at its core and Sefirah aura as its shell. So then, was the boon particularly unusual? With that thought, the Evernight goddess conducted a simple test. It wasn't much of an experiment. She simply threw the sacrificial amulet at an individual who had been corrupted by the portion she had sealed away. Then, after witnessing the result, the Evernight goddess let out an unprecedented exclamation. Fuck. The sheer shock nearly caused her humanity to overwhelm her divinity. Fortunately, no believers were nearby. Otherwise, they might have seen the goddess's indecent reaction at the moment her humanity surged. The amulet, tossed into the sealed space, worked before it even made contact with the corruption source. Though the amulet emitted almost no power fluctuations, the corruption quickly subsided the moment it landed near the source. The corruption that even true gods couldn't solve had been neutralized so effortlessly. Just a single amulet was enough to subdue a corruption source. No wonder the Evernight goddess was so shaken. After all, even a true god could do nothing in the face of certain corruptions. The former Black Emperor Rosal had barely survived after succumbing to one such instance. That kind of corruption was unsolvable even at the divine level. Yet somehow, it was subdued by a talisman powered by nothing but a blessing. What the hell was this? It was like humanity still being in the Stone Age, only to receive two-dimensional foil technology from a random village visit. Anyone would be left with a million questions. The more abnormality she noticed, the more unsettled the Evernight goddess became. Who exactly made this amulet? How could it possess such a heaven-defying effect? Her first thought turned to the sealed and half-dead Emperor Rosal. Rosal, who had sealed himself due to corruption, might have been instantly revived if he had access to such a small amulet. So then, where and from whom did Klein's follower get this thing? The Evernight goddess immediately realized the entity behind this amulet was anything but ordinary. This was undoubtedly something that required thorough investigation. Moreover, if Klein's follower had such an amulet, what about Klein himself? Right now, the Evernight goddess was simply curious. She retrieved the amulet from the hidden space, but the moment it was taken out, the previously subdued corruption surged back, this time even more intensely. Hundreds of times stronger than before. Sensing the danger, the Evernight goddess tightly grasped the amulet, suppressing the now frenzied corruption. She seized the moment to reseal that portion. Once she completed the sealing process, she realized through her divine authority that the entire concealed space had been completely corrupted. After layering multiple concealments over the space and ensuring its stability, she finally exhaled in relief. Then, she looked down at the amulet lying quietly in her palm. It's just a boon, so it can only suppress corruption. And once the suppressed corruption is released, it rebounds even worse. This amulet is truly a double-edged sword. Once it leaves the body, the consequences are severe. However, it's undeniable that as long as a corrupted individual keeps it on their person, they can remain free from corruption's influence indefinitely. The Evernight goddess once again recognized the amulet's immense value. But she also realized something else. This wasn't just a casually made item. It clearly wasn't designed to permanently cure corruption in a single use. But what if it wasn't made casually? What if this blessing could fully resolve corruption? Then this was an entirely different matter. The Evernight goddess had already formed a plan in her mind. Given that the amulet could suppress corruption, then loss of control, the terror all Beyonders feared, should also be suppressible. The Evernight goddess quickly conducted another test. The result was just as she expected. However, once the out-of-control Beyonder lost the amulet, they immediately reverted to their frenzied state. And almost at the very moment of transformation, they exploded into a mist of blood. Their Beyonder characteristics were extracted on the spot. Strangely, the extracted traits were completely pure. Entirely free of corruption. Good grief. Upon confirming this, the Evernight goddess couldn't help but sigh. This amulet, powered only by blessings, had once again proven its worth. It might even be able to suppress the madness caused by the failure of a true god trying to accommodate the uniqueness of adjacent pathways. This made the Evernight goddess even more curious. Who on earth created such an artifact? It was absolutely incredible. It seemed her decision to invest in Klein had been the right one. She hadn't even achieved the result she was aiming for yet, and already this surprise had come her way. Right now, the Evernight goddess could only praise her own foresight. Originally, she had chosen Klein simply to prevent Amon from becoming the Lord of Mysteries. But now, this unexpected return had far exceeded her expectations. With that in mind, The Evernight goddess returned the amulet that had been offered. This casually crafted item was far beyond anything she had anticipated. By the way, the Evernight goddess also returned with interest a portion of the insight she had gleaned. At that same moment, Miss Audrey, who was in the Backland church, saw the amulet reappear before her, along with a divine reply. She stared wide-eyed at the amulet in front of her, her expression filled with disbelief. Is this real? The goddess actually responded to my prayer. Chapter 268, the third. After returning from the Sefirah castle, Ren calmed his agitated emotions, then checked the time. It was 23:14. Almost the end of the day. An unexpected result. But one thing is certain, this Sefirah castle I obtained should be the part that was restored after being torn apart. And Ren could still clearly feel that his control over that Sefirah castle was even greater than Klein's. It's really strange. Why does it feel like I'm the same as an outer god? He quickly dismissed that thought. Outer gods were defined by their overwhelming corruption, but he not only lacked that corruption, he could control loss of control and even cleanse corruption. If outer gods embodied supreme corruption, then Ren's ability to erase it put him in direct opposition to them. It could only mean one thing: he was different. The wild card trait likely gives me the ability to house multiple personalities, and its main effect is probably to keep me mentally stable. The most direct result is that I don't suffer from split personality due to potion backlash. In fact, I can even use the mental imprints within potions as resources for rapid growth. It's also thanks to the wild card that I can remain unique, making it impossible for any being to revive through me. Because of this trait, I don't need to fear going out of control. But the ability to suppress others' loss of control and corruption. Surely that isn't the effect of wild card? At that moment, Ren began to question the wild card trait he had obtained for the first time. He hadn't fully understood its purpose before. But after accidentally intruding on Klein's tarot club and observing Klein and Alger's near loss of control reactions, he realized something crucial: the source of Chica's corruption and instability might have been him. That was now the core problem. Why could he, a seemingly ordinary reincarnator, trigger loss of control in Vianders? He not only caused it, he could suppress it. The difference was purely based on his intention. Because he didn't want Chica to go out of control, she was immediately stabilized. The corruption within her was instantly purged the moment he saw it. Ren quickly came to a conclusion. He could control loss of control and corruption. But why did he have such a strange ability? There was no clear answer yet. Even after thinking for a long time, Ren still couldn't figure it out. So, I'm actually a special existence? Even though he arrived at this conclusion, Ren's face was still full of question marks. He had lived 2 ordinary lives. How could he end up with such an absurd conclusion after reincarnating? I'll shelve this question for now. Without any clues, everything I think is just a baseless guess. Random speculation with no direction or proof. Maybe next time I attend Klein's gathering, I can get an answer. Indeed, Ren had no leads on his own situation, but he could confirm it piece by piece, like how the amulet affected Vianders. The amulet he made didn't contain any power. It was just his blessing conveyed through Sefirah Castle. That blessing existed purely as a conceptual thing. So was his wounds really effective? He should be able to find out next time. No need to rush. Ren relaxed. He sat quietly on the floor. The room was covered in soft blankets, so sitting directly on the ground didn't feel cold at all. He simply waited in silence as time passed. He didn't know how long he sat like that before he finally opened his eyes again. He checked the time. 00:01. A new day had begun. Considering the special events of the night, Ren had a strong sense of premonition. He immediately pulled out a diary and a pen and began writing a new entry. A sudden shock compelled me to pick up the pen on the first day of the new year, today. No, to be precise, yesterday. Was an incredibly exciting day for me. I completed the fate observation during Kogomori's class reunion. I successfully altered the fate of 2 individuals, one who was supposed to die, and one who was imprisoned. I also achieved promotion. I thought it was a perfect day, but just before bed, I felt a strange sensation. Following that feeling, I pushed open a door before me and accidentally entered a gathering of the Tarot Club from another world. The Fool, Klein Moretti. Justice, Audrey Hall. The Hanged Man, Alger Wilson. These are the core figures of the early Tarot Club. Originally, I thought that after advancing in the sequence, I might get the chance to meet the other transmigrator and see how he was doing. I didn't expect that wish to come true today. This unexpected encounter was extremely special and exhilarating. Even as I write this, I still feel overwhelmed with excitement. However, it also made me notice a serious problem. I realized that Fujiwara Chika's loss of control and corruption may have had a direct connection to me. When I barged into the gathering, both Klein and Alger showed signs of losing control. And this happened even under Sefirah Castle suppression. That's when I understood, I might have the ability to induce loss of control and corruption in Beyonders. This raises a strange question: why do I, as a regular person, possess such an ability? I've thought about it a lot, but I still can't arrive at a concrete answer, but it doesn't matter. As long as I can stabilize Chica during her promotion, and if the amulet I gave them can indeed suppress loss of control and corruption, then I can temporarily confirm that this phenomenon is consciously controllable by me. As for the reason why I can do this, I'll need to pay close attention in the future. Maybe I'll find some clues. So why am I so eager today? There's an idea I want to test. Ren stopped writing and reviewed what he had recorded in the diary. Naturally, this triggered the lottery draw, a feature tied to his diary. And this was exactly what Ren had wanted to verify. He spun the roulette wheel. According to the guidance of fate, the indicator stopped at Lord of Mysteries. And the moment he saw the reward, Ren's thoughts were instantly confirmed. Lord of Mysteries, source acquired, Chaos Sea, Chapter 269. The door opens in the dead of night. Sure enough, just as I had imagined, it's not only those holding the diary who receive surprises when encountering major turning points. I do too. No, to be precise, the surprise I received was greater than any of theirs. The appearance of the Chaos Sea confirmed Ren's suspicions. This time, his accidental intrusion into Klein's Tarot Club truly was unplanned, but even so, it brought both psychological and material surprises. It was truly a double blessing. And what he gained was the Chaos Sea, a massive source of corruption buried beneath the forsaken land of the gods. It's just that Ren didn't fully understand why the Chaos Sea was considered a great source of corruption. Likely, it was due to his initial lack of understanding regarding the Lord of Mysteries. But that was fine. He would come to understand it gradually, starting from July 17th. Because he had already sensed it beforehand, Ren didn't need much time to adjust his state of mind. He simply stabilized his breathing and allowed his consciousness to sink deep within. Plop. His consciousness plunged into dark, lightless seawater. The water was icy cold, like the frigid ocean around the Arctic Circle, as if it could freeze both body and thought. Ren slowly opened his eyes underwater. The dark and lightless sea appeared dazzlingly blue in his vision. Though he could barely see the bottom, the endless light illuminated the entire expanse, allowing him to see clearly no matter how deep it was. The vastness of the deep sea could easily induce thalassophobia. In truth, Ren wasn't a strong swimmer. He even harbored a mild fear of the deep sea. But in this sea, he felt nothing but unparalleled safety. Fear of the deep sea usually stemmed from the darkness, but how could he fear the Chaos Sea that was so open and devoid of shadow? He could even feel the sea's unconditional acceptance of him. It was like the warm sensation beneath the sun. The cold seawater gradually absorbed his body heat, slowly warming. Ren felt as though his eyes could take in the entirety of the Chaos Sea, that every part of it was laid bare before him. So he saw that this place lay deep underground. All he had to do was look up, and he could see the river of eternal darkness flowing above the Chaos Sea, with Sefirah Castle standing on its edge. The three Sefirah were arranged in the same realm in an incredibly orderly fashion. Through the Chaos Sea, Ren also witnessed this hybrid world. This place was intricately linked to his spiritual world. Or rather, it seemed to be his conscious world. All three Sefirah existed in orderly harmony within it. Everything felt so seamless. He retracted his gaze. Ren let himself slowly sink into the Chaos Sea. Even this nearly bottomless Chaos Sea had a deepest layer made of silt and sand. When stepping on it, it felt a bit odd and sticky, but upon closer inspection, it was just ordinary mud and sand. Ren raised his hand, and the black silt at the bottom quickly gathered around it, morphing into creatures of various forms. Sharks, octopuses, manta rays, dolphins. Even small whales. It seemed like it could turn into any living creature. So, is this what they mean by corruption? Ren didn't quite get it, but he still reached out to touch the dolphin-shaped mud. The dolphin looked pleased, repeatedly nuzzling his hand. It feels like the so-called corruption doesn't come from the bottom, but from perception. He patted the dolphin, which immediately turned back into the dark, sticky silt. Ren didn't think this was corruption. He believed the true source of corruption in the Chaos Sea was its gaze that could perceive everything. But that was just his guess. Ren shook his head and pulled himself out of the ocean of consciousness. The five sources could enhance his ability to grant powers and broaden his range of methods. Ren's attitude toward the sources had always been consistent. Maybe they weren't that useful for now, but it was definitely better to have them than not. In his previous life, one of his favorite things in games was hoarding. Even if something was useless, he didn't mind. The most reassuring thing was to have everything in the warehouse. I'm a hoarding rat. After a round of reassurance and confirmation, Ren felt his day was completely fulfilled, and he could rest in peace. But before that, he looked toward the door. Hayasaka, it's so late. You're not going to bed yet? The air door opened, and Hayasaka, wearing a bathrobe, stepped into the room. Her snow-white bare feet and the thighs peeking out from beneath the bathrobe were eye-catching. Her hair wasn't tied up, just loosely draped over her shoulders. Probably already getting ready for bed. Hayasaka looked at Ren sitting on the ground. She walked over with a smile, gently adjusted her robe to cover her legs, and sat down next to him. Because I saw Master's diary, I knew you hadn't gone to sleep yet. So I came to pay you a visit. Ren looked at her in surprise. At this hour? Yes, that's right. And Master should be curious whether I might draw something good based on your experience, right? Ren thought for a moment and shook his head slightly. I'm a little curious about that, but honestly, it's unlikely you'll draw anything better. Based on what I know about the power systems you and Kaguya came from, Devil Fruits and the 6 styles are already top-tier abilities in that world. The Door fruit you obtained, and Kaguya's Ice fruit, are both extremely practical. There aren't many fruits that can outclass them. And since each person can only have one Devil Fruit, your next step is likely mastering its power, further developing it, and then mastering the 6 styles. That's the path to dominance. What you and Kaguya really need is individual growth. Too many outside elements will only distract you both. Chapter 270, Wanting the rights of a maid hockey is for the future, at least until you and Kaguya improve your physical fitness, Devil Fruit abilities, and mastery of the 6 styles. Otherwise, there are too many things you haven't mastered yet, and you won't be able to handle what comes next. After all, it's only been a month since Kaguya obtained her Devil Fruit. And for you, Hayasaka, it's been less than half a month since you got yours. Right now, you and Kaguya shouldn't pursue power too aggressively. The power system in One Piece mainly revolves around Devil Fruits, the 6 styles, swordsmanship, and hockey. Upon careful analysis, the overall structure of the power system isn't particularly deep, but its capabilities can still reach very high levels. These 4 categories of abilities can all be deeply cultivated. As long as one or more of them are pushed to the limit, that strength is enough to stand out at sea. That's why Ren was confident that for now, what Hayasaka and Kaguya needed was to train their physical fitness, start learning the 6 styles, master their Devil Fruit abilities, and, after accumulating a solid foundation, move toward developing hockey. In that case, can Miss Kaguya and I accumulate draws? Yes, that's right. Hayasaka nodded slightly. She understood now that the direction for her and Kaguya's future efforts would be strengthening themselves step by step. Devil Fruit abilities and the 6 styles require training. Physical strength could be enhanced by gradually consuming seeking meat, thereby expanding their combat options. While developing themselves, they could also accumulate draws, allowing them to earn greater rewards later and further enrich their methods. It was a positive feedback loop. Seeing that Hayasaka understood, Ren continued the discussion on rewards. Also, this diary is mostly based on my personal experiences. You weren't involved, so the rewards you get won't be substantial. Even if there's a draw, it's unlikely you'll get something valuable. It might even be useless. Hayasaka nodded. Everyone already understood how the diary's reward system worked. The key was how much participation one had in the events within the diary. Only with significant involvement could one earn better rewards. Even if the level of involvement was low, it was still possible to increase the quality of rewards by accumulating more draws. Compared to pointless rewards, saving up for better ones was the smarter approach. After addressing Hayasaka's curiosity, Ren returned to the main point. Besides the lottery? Yes. Hayasaka lowered her head slightly and leaned closer, resting her head on Ren's shoulder. Because of how you treated Miss Sanoko and Miss Kaguya today. As your maid, perhaps I shouldn't ask this, but Master, do I have the right to? Ren was briefly stunned, but once his slow-processing mind caught up, he immediately wrapped his arms around Hayasaka, who was leaning against him. Of course. Hearing that, Hayasaka smiled gently, then lifted her head a little, eyes filled with anticipation. Then, Master, do you want to exercise? Can I? No one disturbed the quiet night. The lovely maid, with the heart of someone willing to cross the line, began exercising her rights alongside her master. As the sun rose on the horizon, it pulled back the curtain of night, pushing away the darkness and ushering in a new light. The chirping of birds and insects in the mountains and fields offered warm morning greetings to those slowly waking from their dreams. However, this morning, the sun had barely lifted the night curtain when it was quickly obscured by clouds. The entire sky turned gloomy, as if a downpour was approaching. This further delayed. Early in the morning, Kaguya woke from her sleep. The moment she opened her eyes, she subconsciously reacted. Hayasaka. She called for her maid. After a long silence, still hearing no response, Kaguya slowly opened her eyes. A strange ceiling. Her hazy mind gradually began to clear. Ah, right. I stayed at the hot spring hotel last night. Hi, Asaka's in the next room. Yawning, Kaguya sat up in bed.